All right, we ready to sync up?
We're ready to sync up.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't actually need to.
We've got to sync up.
All right, you ready?
We got to do our fusion dance.
2, 3.
Ah.
No one could see that. That was a purely visual gag. I like how we keep doing purely visual gags even though no one can see them. That is a smart and helpful move for engaging an audience. Hi. Yeah, that's the intro. I'm keeping it.
Okay,
You can't
all
stop
right.
me. Once I start talking, it doesn't turn off. All right.
I see.
Yeah. Hey, so sorry this one took a hot second. We had some life stuff kind of coming up the last couple of weeks, so we haven't had a good time to sit down for like 4 hours straight and just talk. But this is the Higurashi Chapter 2 post or theories discussion video. We're doing like it's the Chapter 2 for Higurashi playback video.
Yep.
I've got some theories. Vivian's got her questions. Y'all send in some questions as well. It's going to be a good time had by all, I am sure. However, I don't have to actually like do any of the work on this one. I just got to get talked to, which is nice. I already did my work. So
don't have to do the work, you say, as you prepare to answer a barrage of probing questions.
I mean, I've already done here's the one thing to keep about. Unlike the other one where we did like that pretty quickly after, there was unfortunately like a couple week break in between me finishing our rewatch and us sitting down to do this. I might be a little bit rusty on some things. Vivian's gonna give me some leeway though. So
yeah, maybe.
Yep, just
I'll think about it.
Work with me here, okay?
So
we're
we're gonna do a bit of a different structure this time.
Okay.
Because we got a ton of good questions from folks on Discord and YouTube and other such places.
Put more bourbon in that coffee than I thought I did. Carry on.
I see. So we're gonna start with, I'm gonna ask you to just give the condensed version of your theory on what's going on now that there's been some time. Then we're gonna have the second section, we're going to go directly into viewer questions because I want to make sure we get time to address those.
Okay.
And that they go like up front. There's good stuff in there. A lot of it is the stuff I would have asked anyway.
Okay.
And then we're going to do my wrap-up questions at the end.
Okay.
So
I trust that you know what you're doing. All right.
Oh, good. One of us does then. Anyway, let's kick things off with your theory. So you had theories that you described as we were playing through viewing events as they happened, and you've now had some time to percolate on that for some time. So I'm curious. So what do you think's going on now?
When you say my theory, do you mean like grand theory or like theory for what was happening in Chapter 2?
Let's say theory for what happened in Chapter 2.
Okay.
We can do both.
I think here's the thing is that I think I did another rewatch like I usually do, and the thing is I ended our first watch with a theory, and on rewatch that theory still held more or less.
Which theory is that again?
So here is my theory for this chapter is that unfortunately a lot of what happens in Chapter 2 is, at best, tangentially related to the serial murders of years before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A bold claim.
Yeah, this is kind of like a hijacked by Shion chapter.
This is my story now, jackass.
Yeah. And she even says as much at the very end, right, to Keiichi, like, hey, if you'd just given me that doll on that date, none of this would have happened, which, yeah, kind of makes sense. So for those of you just coming in after a while, my theory on this one is that this is largely the events of this episode are largely a result of Shion coming into contact with Keiichi and the kind of and her jealousy for what her sister has. In this case, both Keiichi's affections and her position within the family. And that kind of reaches a critical mass after Keiichi can't even just be like, oh, the key scene to remember here is like when Keiichi's being tortured at the end, the Sonozaki sister who's torturing him, who I'm just gonna hard read as Shion. I'm 99% certain that's Shion.
Okay.
She says, like, if you're just giving me that doll, none of this would have happened. We're meant to believe that applies way back to the beginning, because this is the scene that Keiichi remembers of giving it to Mion, because he still thinks it's Mion torturing him. But Mion still doesn't really care for that kind of thing. She never really has in that same sense. I think the scene that's being referred to is the scene where Keiichi and Shion on a date go into the toy shop to get her that doll, right? And then upon seeing Mion, Keiichi's like, oh shit, you're actually a different person? And then, I think that's really what did it for Shion. Because Shion is like, wait, hold on. This isn't even a bit on his part. Like, he can't find affection for me unless he thinks I'm my sister. And I think it's that specific moment that really kind of brings back some of Shion's latent, some of the stuff that Shion talks about and having buried. Some of her a very sadistic streak in her. And then the stuff that happens on Watanagashi with Mio and I can't remember his name right now. Tomitake. That stuff, I think, is unrelated to the other stuff that comes after it. But because, as we saw in chapter 1, it seems more or less like Tomitake and Mio dying is sort of the plan, for lack of a better term. It seems like the two of them dying is kind of tied into this years-long annual death thing. And given the same fact that it happened the same way in 2 chapters, I'm inclined to believe that that's more or less what is to be expected on that front.
Okay.
The stuff that comes after it, and I think we can, and just to back up just a second, I think we can clearly delineate that stuff because it's, someone in the after party mentioned this, and I agree. It's very much done in the same style where it's like perfect crime, almost entirely. Something did go differently in that they found Mio's corpse where they hadn't in the last chapter. But so there could be the case that something small did go differently. But other than that, like, we're still, the body of Tomitake is still presented in the same way they wanted it to. Yep. The police are still taking that same notion away from it. I think it's like 95% success rate there. And falling in that same history of, like, quote-unquote perfect crimes clearly delineates it from the very slapdash and, like, no-holds-barred slaughterfest that happens afterwards.
What,
right.
You think there were some imperfections in Shion's plan?
No, there couldn't be. That was loud. I didn't mean to be that loud. I think, so again, just to say, I'm going to hard attribute the other stuff that happens afterwards to Shion's machinations.
Okay.
But unfortunately for Keiichi, the fact that Tomitake and Mio died and then Shion goes missing creates a pattern in his head where he's like, oh, those were the other 3 people in the storehouse with me. What's the common denominator here? The storehouse. And that's why he gets hung up on that, and the other stuff kind of gets worked into that pattern of his. Because he's not looking at it from the point of view of these are 2 different things happening. In one thing, Tomitake and Mio died. That's kind of the end of where the Watanagashi murders happen. The stuff that comes after it, so the mayor, what's her name? Grandma Sonozaki.
Oh,
Oryou.
Oryou, yeah.
Oryou. Rika, and Satoko caught a stray one, unfortunately. But all of those deaths are, well, the first 3 are specifically Shion seeking out to kill high-ranking members of the other 3 families. Satoko caught a stray, unfortunately. Satoko, that really did not have, that was just unfortunate. And then eventually also goes on to kill Mion. Anyway, that's my general idea for like what the shape of that is in chapter 2. Is that it's kind of like two different series of events getting conflated in our protagonist's mind. And I guess like I can't be too hard on him because in his position, like I don't see a reason to differentiate the two when I'm in that and highly stressed and also a kid and people around me are dying. Like I'm not in a place to think these are two separate mass killings. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I can't exactly blame him, but that's kind of how I'm looking at the events of this chapter. Unfortunately, that means there's not a ton that can be taken away and applied to the larger. Well, I mean, there's some things that can be extrapolated, but like the events and the killings themselves, I don't think tell us more about these annual deaths on the Watanagashi, which seems to be the bigger mystery. Like it was said at the beginning of the chapter, this is just a straightforward cruelty, right? Oh, how's that? How did I do a good job remembering things?
Yeah, that's a perfectly cogent explanation.
Yeah, and I know that there are some bits or pieces that I assume you'll be asking me about them, so I'm not going to get into all of the little ways in which that subtly contradicts what's in the narrative right now, because I assume you're going to get to them. But that was more or less my operating theory at the end of the chapter, and even as I went back through and rewatched, that theory held water. I am more confident than I was before that is broadly the shape of events in this chapter. There might be certain small details that I'm wrong about or specific instances, but I have a feeling that, like, if you look at the mold, it's got the right shape.
All right. Well.
Oh, yeah, that is more bourbon than I thought. Okay. We're going to have to do this quickly before I get schwasty.
Now that we've got the broad explanation of the chapter,
we do.
Let's talk about some viewer questions.
Yo, viewers! I love viewers. They're the reason we do this, you know.
They are?
Well, no, that's actually a lie. We do this for ourselves, but like we post them on the internet because people watch them. I do think that's an important distinction. It's the reason why, like, we always just kind of do whatever we're going to do, even if it doesn't wind up doing numbers. Anyway, that's a tangent for another time. Tell me some of these viewer questions.
All right. Let's start with one from Volition from Discord, who asks, do you still think there's a point of divergence between the events of each Higurashi chapter? If so, do you have any current thoughts on what it might be?
Okay. Do I think there's a point of divergence? Well, there has to be if they're different events.
Maybe the universe has no rules and is just chaos.
For a while when we started this, I had been when we started watching it the first time, I'd been entertaining the idea that the point of divergence was further back. I think that eventually got nixed when we finally got more concrete details that, like, yes, the history is the same. So I'm guessing the point of divergence is roughly around when Keiichi comes to live in Hinamizawa.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe on that first train ride there, right? Because in the first chapter, we see him waking up on that train ride, hearing someone's voice. That could be that point. I don't think the specifics really super matter. It's some point early in that month. The important thing is that the historical stuff stays the same.
Okay.
However, stuff is different. So there are two ways to interpret this. Either free will is a real thing, or there is some measurable change between something that changes every time that the events repeat. I want to talk about some ideas for like what the framing device is, but it's kind of Umineko spoilers. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to say Umineko spoilers right here, and then I'm going to, in editing, move this to the very end of the discussion. How's that sound, Eskay? In editing, you good? Cool. All right, cutting back into the normal stuff now.
All right. Let's change topics.
This is going to be so fun to edit later. Yeah,
it'll be great. So, one from Aleph Alpha from the Discord.
Yo.
What sort of central ideas keep reoccurring and you think are important now that you've read 2 episodes?
Central ideas that keep reoccurring, and what do I think is central ideas that keep reoccurring? I think one of the big ideas that keeps reoccurring is what we owe to our communities.
Mm.
And I think that's important very much in this time period, because as we start moving on past now then to the present day, like there's definitely been a drift kind of away from this larger sense of community, right? Where we can mostly live online and live in our own apartments in big cities, away from one another. And you can see that kind of fear of the creeping modernization and the isolation that comes along with it. As that kind of dread on the horizon of the dam, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of this is about how we as a community deal with that. Some people's reactions to it are different than others, obviously. Some people just want folks to be happy and be able to live together with one another, and some people will defend their way of life to the point of taking other lives. So I think as we go on, what we're going to understand more and more is what people expect out of the community that they live in and what they're willing to do to defend that. And that goes even as far as Oishi, right? We know that he's got his big ring of cops going under the table trying to take down the Sonozakis. He's doing that in some part because he believes that the community he lives in shouldn't have people like the Sonozakis in it. When we go in there and we hear his thoughts, he's expecting to find like drug ring stuff. He's expecting to find poppy farms. He's expecting to find firearms, right?
Yep.
He's going in there and I believe him when he says that that's what the stuff he's looking for. When he goes in there, he's looking for that stuff because he believes that they are a threat to the community. The 3 families can be said to do the things that they do because they think it's best for the community. And I think the seed at the beginning of the seed that moves into the annual killings on the Watanagashi is this is what's best for the community. Creating this specter of dread that by the sacrifice of a few can keep out the demon of modernization for just that little longer.
Interesting.
Right. Not to say that it might not be misguided, because now the people who live there have to be in fear of it, but like I think that a lot of characters' motivations are going to come down to what they want out of their community. Keiichi, for example, just wants to be with his friends. He's a pretty simple guy like that. He just wants to have a good summer with his friends, and that's all he wants. He wants to be a member of their community, right? I think some part of him realizes that he's kind of an outsider, but he wants to be invited into this Hinamizawa community.
Yep.
But he just wants to have a good time with the friends that he loves. That's also about community. And you see it a lot too in the way that like the community is kind of a faceless character in this story. The actions of the average everyday citizens, as kind of directed by like Mion in that. Well, that wasn't Mion, but you know, kind of as kind of directed by the head of the Sonozakis in those couple scenes there, right? Directing them out to try to find people in the middle of the night. The will of the community is also an important figure in this story, it seems. I don't know, does that seem like a good answer? I feel like that's a good answer.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I already tied that into some of the other stuff, like the fear of creeping modernization. I don't think it's particularly subtle about that. The change of a way of life from, their more rural, insular to something that's a bit more modern and open to the wider world. People will do some scary things if they see that their life, the stability they wanted and thought they knew crumbling away from them. And it's I don't have a hard time believing that there would be some people in the community who would do something grossly ritualistic like this if they thought there was a chance it would help save their lifestyle for the years to come. And actually, I had my mind changed on that by, of all things, a Pokemon fanfiction. No, wait, don't run away. Don't run away. I swear I'm being serious here. I was reading a Pokemon fanfiction that had a similar kind of conceit to it that was set in a 1960s rural town that's kind of on the that's seeing the jobs of people there go away, the fading glory, of the old class of the mold money class, and slowly becoming a ghost town of sorts, and the things that they were willing to do in order to keep that way of life going. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Okay, all right. Even if I don't agree with it, I could imagine. I could absolutely imagine a scenario where people were doing something so objectively fruitless and horrifying because they're lost, they're listless, their way of life is crumbling, and they think that and they have been promised that this will give them the stability that they've been looking for. This will help keep their way of life the way it was. I think that's might be part of the motivation behind the Watanagashi murders, but
fair enough.
Yeah. Other themes that keep cropping up, identity. But like who you are versus who people perceive you as, right? The distance between Tomitake Jiro, the friendly photographer who hangs out around town and has a girlfriend that tells kids ill-advised ghost stories, and versus the Tomitake Jiro who has no legal identity, lives off the grid, knows how to pick locks, right? Just
normal things,
hot guy shit. The Mio who likes to walk around and tell kids ghost stories and likes to research the deep history of this region and will go to great lengths to study it, versus the Mio whose dental records are wrong or faked. I think she did that. Pretty sure she did that. She's a nurse. I have no problem believing that she could fake dental records. Sorry to cut that one off at the bat. We could talk about it again when it gets. Obviously Shion and Mion, right? The idea that they can kind of like swap in and out of each other's lives pretty seamlessly, but can they actually? Do they? I know when we were watching, I started trying to pick apart some tells for who's who, and most of the ones I postulated while we were watching fell apart on rewatch. Even the one where I was like convinced that no, Mion cannot be at Angel Mort because the uniform would show the tattoo on her back.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. She's the one at Angel Mort who takes that time to explain all the history to Keiichi behind the labor movement there, right? Right? Like, that's her. So, fuck. The only differentiating thing I've been able to find is that Shion will always refer to Rika as Rika-chama.
Interesting.
Because she's not close enough to Rika. And Mion will not.
Rika-chama is funny. Halfway between Sama and Chan. Like, I'm being incredibly respectful to you as the head of a religious movement, but I also think you're so cute that I just want to take you home.
Yeah.
So I've invented a new honorific to be both of those things.
Exactly. But that is a Shionism, not a Mionism. And it's part of the reason why we know that it's Shion who is the one that's alive in the after the Watanagashi. Anyway, that's kind of what I've been thinking about in terms of overarching themes.
All right.
Hopefully that makes some sense.
It does.
I was really heavy on the bourbon. I'm sorry.
You don't have to drink the coffee.
Yes, I do.
You do not.
It's hot coffee. I have to drink it.
It's hot out.
Yup.
It'll get better as it cools down because it will become less hot.
No, because then it'll be... Nothing is worse than lukewarm coffee. Cold coffee I can agree with. Lukewarm coffee, no. Lukewarm coffee is gross.
Have we talked about this on the channel?
I'm sure we have.
I'm a disgusting freak because I enjoy coffee lukewarm.
Yeah, you are. That like I understand people who enjoy cold coffee. There are occasions where I will prefer cold coffee as well. I cannot understand people who like lukewarm coffee. And you, my dearest beloved wife, are a goddamn freak.
Hot coffee burns my mouth and then I can't taste anything.
Skill issue.
Fair.
What's next on the list?
All right. So, next up from Be a Gremlin on YouTube. It'll probably come up anyway. It didn't. But for the discussion video, I'd like to ask exactly when and why Eskay started to suspect that Mion the culprit was actually Shion. Was there a specific clue that turned your thinking that way? Or was it more vibes-based?
I think it was vibes-based for a little while because part of me was like, there has to be a catch here, right? For a while, it was like, there has to be a catch. I think what really cinched it for me, though, and this might be kind of a meta reason, on the first watch, what cinched it for me was the double meaning behind, you should have given me the doll that day. As soon as I realized that there was a second viable interpretation of that, I'm like, oh, they are taking us for a ride, huh? It was only on, and that's why, like, the first time around, it was just a theory. It was on rewatch where I was going back and being like, okay, I had this theory. It's kind of based more on vibes and convention than it is actual, stuff in the thing. Let's test it out. It was only on rewatch where I became, like, convinced that, yeah, okay, that actually was right. Because, admittedly, like, I started kind of going that way at first because I'm like, what? How can I outsmart this game, right? But that alone does not make a solid theory. So it was only when it held up under rewatch where I'm like, okay. This is not just me talking out of my own ass. I think some of it was just how over the top Shion is during that last confrontation between her and Keiichi and I can't remember her name right now. It's been weeks. Please help me.
Wait, what?
Keiichi's girlfriend.
Which one?
Keiichi's girlfriend who could do murder if she wants as a treat.
Wait, which one?
Oh, God. Why can't I remember her name?
Who are we talking about?
White dress. Hat.
Oh, Rena.
Rena. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. I want you to know I was legitimately struggling here to remember Rena's name, okay?
And I was legitimately struggling to get who you were referring to.
Keiichi's girlfriend, obviously.
Keiichi's girlfriend who does murders. Okay, so the cast of the game.
Okay, hold on. I disagree with them all being Keiichi's girlfriend. Satoko is Keiichi's little sister.
That's true.
Who can do murders.
That's true also.
Rika is Keiichi's, I don't know, grandmother.
Wine aunt.
Wine aunt. Yes, there we go. Who could do murders if she wants to. Okay, yeah. But that last scene between Shion and Rena and Keiichi, especially after the point where, Rena confirms that, yeah, there's a wire on, and then Shion takes the opportunity to be very loudly, yes, I, Mion Sonozaki, take all responsibility for what I'm doing here, and starts laying it on really fucking thick. And then there's also, like, the very carefully constructed dialogue between the two sisters when they're down there, right?
I've got another question about that.
Oh,
if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
That's the other thing that Be a Gremlin asks. How do you reconcile that theory with the dialogue from Shion? How do you reconcile your theory with the dialogue from Shion in the cage? She's calling her twin explicitly Mion, and she answers to Shion, despite being in a situation in which you wouldn't think there would be any motivation to maintain a facade for Mion's benefit. Why would that be the case?
Because she's in a cage and tortured. She'll go along with whatever her torturer wants.
But that's not what's being asked. Why would you do that? For whose benefit?
Keiichi's. Got to sell it for Keiichi, and you got to sell it for the police later. So the idea is that I think a lot of that
Okay.
scene is Shion specifically taking petty vengeance on Mion by forcefully inserting herself into her life and making her sister capitulate to that. You notice that she'll always say sis, 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 very neutral. And that when Keiichi comes to say, hey, it's all over, and addresses her as Shion in the cage, that is what causes her to lose it. That, like, the realization that, no, you've so successfully duped him that he now thinks I'm you. That horror is what causes her to, right?
Okay.
And then when she finally does address her sister by name, it's because she's repeating back word by word what her sister asks her to say. Right? And obviously Shion, who is pretending to be Mion, is going to be very aggressive using those names because she wants to hammer that into her sister. This is about torture for her sister by
Hammer that
taking her
in.
life. Yeah, right. Taking her life like by force and then forcing her to bear witness to it and forcing her to capitulate to it. That's what the real torture is. So yeah, that's how I reconcile that.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. And that's also why it's so painful for her when Keiichi comes up and addresses her by her sister's name. Because she's like, oh no, I've already lost. There's nothing I can do here. And then Shion kills her and throws her in the well anyway afterwards.
Why not?
Because why not? Dick move. IMHO. Dick move. Anyway, what's next?
Let's get another one from the Discords. Dohuario asks, does the knowledge of Shion existing change any perspective on Chapter 1?
I'm kind of mixed on that. On the one hand, I don't know. It might. Part of my operating theory for how the end of this chapter works is that kind of necessarily Rena and Shion have to be in cahoots. So that if it is indeed Shion at the end of chapter 1 where they're, got Keiichi up in his room and are going to stab him with a needle, right? Then that could change the understanding of that situation. It really depends on how developed Mion's plan is to take over her sister's life and how far she was willing to go for it. Right? It really seems like it was kind of something that she always had the capacity to do, but Keiichi's actions put her over the line. But if it was something that she had always planned to do, but just without as much kind of like dramatic flair to it, without it was so sloppy, maybe she did seamlessly slip into Mion's place during chapter 1 and we didn't notice. Right? It would, I guess the differentiating factor is, was that always her plan? Or was that something she just had the capacity to do and got tipped over by Keiichi's actions? Right? Or was she always going to do this and Keiichi's actions made her more sloppy and a bit more desperate to kind of, instead of just doing it in a cleaner and subtle way, right, where she's unnoticed.
Oh no, I was all prepared to kill my sister and take her place, but now I have a boy to impress.
Yes.
Oh no.
No, exactly. Because she knows that she can't get that last part, right? Because she's confronted with the fact that she can't have that last part. So she need that part of her needs to go that extra mile in order to become Mion now. Because she knows that that's something that Mion will always have that she couldn't. That she was confronted directly with that fact in chapter 2. Whereas in chapter 1, it just, any romantic tension between Mion and Keiichi just kind of goes largely unrecognized. Not to say it isn't there, but they're kind of more like in the bro zone. The brone, if you will.
Bro zone.
Bro zone layer.
Yeah. Oh no, I forgot to say the funny thing.
What's the funny thing?
In the themes, you forgot the most important theme, which is just utterly destroying your friends at tabletop games.
Oh, yes.
Just crushing their will to live.
Absolutely merciless.
I just thought that's worth remarking on. That's important. Anyway.
And that's the other thing that as soon as Shion replaces Mion, she kind of loses interest in the whole keeping up the game club thing.
Yeah.
that's another kind of tell there. Like, despite wanting her sister's life, she's not willing to go the distance of like keeping up that part of the facade. She just wants the friend. She doesn't want to put in the work to keep the friend group together. Speaking of big things that never happened, what was with the choosing between the two of them bit that was supposed to happen in front of the whole town at Watanagashi that never really did? Was that was the big? It either didn't seem to happen for the five, the big competition between all five of them, or it did happen as something else that we didn't immediately recognize it as. Sorry to sidebar here for a moment, but
what, the 5 demon firefight?
Yeah,
yeah,
the 5 demon firefight, and there was also the part where like one of the sisters was like, "You're gonna have to choose between the two of us," and it's like, or started making Keiichi think that he was gonna have to choose between the two of them, and that. But yeah, kind of farted out there. I guess Mion kind of lost the spark for it after, all of her friends started hanging out together without her. Because let's make that clear. They all started hanging out without Mion because they assumed Mion was the one there. So, from Mion's perspective, she's like, why are all my friends hanging out without me? She on her perspective, she probably thinks that they don't want to hang out with her anymore. Or something silly like that. Because then the first time she catches up with them again, it's when Keiichi walks in with her sister on his arm, right?
Yeah.
Anyway. Sorry for the sidebar.
All right. I got a kind of pair of spiritually related questions, I think, from two different folks.
Okay, spiritually related. I like that.
Yeah, they're not the same question, but they're related. So, the first is from Volition on Discord, which is, how do you feel Higurashi compares to Umineko in terms of its historical backdrop? Both events treated as historical within the story, and the choice to set the main events in the 1980s. So, that's the first question.
Yep.
The second related one is from Aleph Alpha on Discord and is, how do you feel and what are you thinking about the political and cultural ideas that Ryukishi is exploring? Okay. I think it's kind of hard to answer one of these without the other, so I figured that I may as well throw them both at you simultaneously and let you juggle them.
So, both of these take place during within a decade of one another, right? Ish. Umineko's in the 80s and Higurashi's in the 70s. I think.
Wait. Is Higurashi in the 70s?
Isn't it? Pretty sure.
I thought it was in the 80s.
No, it's in the early 80s. You're right.
Yeah, I thought that
the events of the dam start in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we actually hit on a lot of this as we were playing through. I think that Ryukishi is an author that is very conscious of class. You see it a lot in Umineko, especially when the whole cast of characters is a rich family and their servants, right? But in this one's in Higurashi specifically, so far, we've been treated to a story of a town that's kind of on the last remaining fringes of modernization. That slow march forward, and how that's kind of attacked the way of life for the people who are least able to defend it. It seems. There's an issue of labor here, right? Of how do I want to phrase this? Of how people's way of life and what they're willing and how they're able to support themselves is forcibly changed over time. We talked about it with the example of the one person who still lives in the middle of Narita Airport, right?
Yep.
Where it like the major force of the government will come and encroach, and unless you are willing to fight it to the very bitter end to defend your way of life, it is going to be subsumed and replaced. There's this specter of modernization and of everything that comes with it, both good and bad. And Some of that is this acceptance that this kind of rural, peaceful, more peaceful way of life is going to forcibly come to an end as the world comes closer and closer and closer, to the point where like it's literally asking to take their entire town away from them.
Yeah.
Right. Like the dam is more literal in that, and not to mention that it like the dam itself is already is something that literally takes lives. Like compared to the Kurobe Dam, right? And it was 100+ people who lost their lives making that dam.
Yep.
It's not just literally the town; it's literal lives who are being asked of in order to move this country forward. This is. And I think Ryukishi, as an author, comes at it from the angle of, like, even if you think that, in general, it's good that we have these new things, you need to be, like, it's not wrong for someone on the other end of that to be like, this. Look at what you're asking of me. Look at, this is my life gone, the people I loved gone. What are we giving up? And why haven't we stopped longer to reckon with that? One of the things that's really, and again, one of the things that's very similar between Higurashi and Umineko, while they both take place on opposite ends of the spectrum, they're both very much dealt with class. Where the Umineko caste are largely rich people and their servants. The people of Higurashi are people whose power does not always come from money.
Yep.
Even the Sonozakis, like the big Yakuza family, their power comes from their ability to exercise force and control over the community. There is a storied history to them, if you believe the legends about the three families, right? Like, that power is not money. That's power by of legacy and being there in the community for however long. The mayor doesn't seem to be a particularly rich person. Like, the people we see in this are living more or less humble lives.
Yeah, they're rural farmers.
They're rural farmers who go to a school that seems to exist solely out of spite.
Government says we need a school, so we got a school.
Exactly. It seems like they built the school just perfectly out of spite to like give the children a reason to stay in the town. And it's about how, like, those people don't have access to the same kind of power that the Ushiromias do. The Ushiromias, for all of their failing wealth, and again, I'm not spoiling anything about Umineko that isn't covered in, like, the intro of chapter 1 here, just to be clear. For all of that, they still have the money and status to make things happen. Right? That they are a storied family with a lot of money and power that comes along with it. And even though their time is catching up with them, they're still very much a class apart.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whereas the most power you see in the residents of Hinamizawa is bought at the hands of the Yakuza. They have their power by force. They have to defend that power. They can't just simply buy their way into more of it. They have local power, but even then they're still subservient to a larger Yakuza organization on a more national scale, or on a larger scale, right? That's where Mion's dad is, acting as the representative to that larger group. And they have to have their own people in parliament. They don't have the money or resource to buy off senators. They make their people the senators. Which I think is an interesting. I think it's a very important distinction.
It is.
It's a distinction between I have enough money to reliably make you do what I want versus we can't trust anyone but ourselves to do this. They have they exercise their power over the police as well, but they don't do it from bribes. Like, the one time we see them throwing money around, it's because someone in their family got someone killed. Right? We see them throwing money at the Maibaras at the very end of chapter 2 because of what, air quotes, Mion put their son through. Right? Because what else can you do?
Yep.
But that's the only time we see them use money to solve a problem. And I think that distinction is really important. Distinction between the comfortably rich and the people who, even with power, still have to work and fight for it. And given the way that Mion frames the history of the area, it is a war. It's the damn wars. This is a fight, at least in her telling of it. Right? They see the dam as like an existential threat to their community. If someone was trying to if someone wanted to buy up Rokonjima, or if someone wanted to take Rokonjima and turn it into, like, I don't know, what would you use it for? A wind farm or something like that. The Ushiromis have the money to say, no, you don't actually do that. If someone wants to take Hinamizawa and flood it for a dam, they don't have that option. They're not the same class of people. They don't have the money to make that go away. They have to use what they have, and what they have is themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is Ryukishi is saying that revolution won't come unless you do it by your own hands. I think that's the takeaway here. I think we can all feel good about this mess. No, I don't expect a lot of pushback. Am I just talking for nothing here? I feel like I hit on something there. Anyway, I do think this is important that this takes place like right before the big crash in the Japanese economy in the like. It's a little less present than it is in Umineko, but like knowing that despite all this progress, there is a very large downward trend in the very near future, kind of casts an ironic shadow on all of this. And what was the labor movement we were talking about? Do you remember the name of it?
I don't even remember.
It was I don't remember where in my notes it was because I didn't have it pulled up. But
there were like
this. There is a name for this labor movement, and I don't have it in front of me. Maybe Eskay will put it on screen. Maybe I won't. It depends on whether or not I hear this particular part of.
That's fine.
Yeah. Regardless, yeah, that's how I feel about all that. I also think it's important that historically this takes place after the end of World War II, right when Japan has a very large national incentive to kind of like save face almost.
Mm-hmm.
Because after my knowledge of history is not 100%, so please forgive me if some of my strokes are wrong here. But like after the kind of like national shame of having to capitulate in World War II, there's this sense of needing to project a strong, forward-moving, modern image of their, like, like we're still a national player. We still have this power as a country. We can still move forward. And the war is still very important because, like, that's where the Sonozaki wealth comes from, right? At least by that one tale.
Yep.
Even if the Sonozakis were one of the three families and like a figure in the area, that's where like the wealth that gave them that level of status came from. That now allows them to act as more of like a Yakuza player rather than just ceremonial figureheads. All right, that's all I got.
I think another interesting parallel is just the idea that things end, right?
Yeah.
It happens in both Umineko and Higurashi, both in the very literal level, that caste dies, largely. Doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire who owns a private island or some random farm boy in a podunk hillside village.
Right.
Death still comes for you in these stories. And at the same time, the way of life ends.
Yeah.
Japan is not an agrarian society anymore, and it's not in the middle of its economic miracle anymore. So, as we're seeing literally these characters suffer and die and struggle, we're also seeing figuratively the ways of life that they're participating in and representing also
die. And
yeah.
What makes this fascinating to me is knowing that R07's next entry in the When They Cry series, Chiconia, takes place in what appears to be the future.
Yeah.
Which is like, I haven't read any of Chiconia yet. I just kind of know like the surface level details of it. So again, I've got no spoilers for you, but given that this is such a large part of When They Cry, is this kind of historical reckoning with class, wealth, modernization. I wonder like how that's going to tie into what appears to be a science fiction future setting. But that's for another time. Shall we? Yeah, that's what I got.
All right. Let's do another question then.
I like questions.
So, Lapis Lazarite from YouTube asks, this is probably going to get addressed at some point during the retrospective. I don't think it did. But which similarities between Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 do you think will get carried forward in future chapters?
Okay, that's interesting. I think unless something goes wrong, I talked about this earlier. I think unless something goes wrong with the group that are doing the Watanagashi murders, that Mio and Jiro Tomitake will continue to be the ones that die. I think that if they don't die on Watanagashi, that's a sign that something has gone differently with the group putting those on, if that makes sense. I do think that that's, if not something that'll be consistent, that's something that we can watch for. Also, now going into Chapter 3, I'm going to be watching to see whether or not Shion still goes through with her plan to replace Mio. I'm not going to go back and rewatch Chapter 1 until after we're done with the question arcs. I think I said that already just because I don't have time to rewatch every chapter every time we do one of these. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not that series of events is something that is always going to happen or something that Keiichi knocked kind of that over the line there, right? There are other smaller details of things like I mentioned at one point the comparison to Majora's Mask, kind of like keeping track of who's doing what when, like just the mayor still go for his appointment? Do the Maibaras still get that phone call? And how do they respond to it? Stuff like that, were just like tiny details, like what changes here, right? Do Mio and Tomitake still try to break into the storehouse? But the big plots I'm looking at are Shion replacing Mion and who the Watanagashi murders are this year. I think those have been the big break points so far. Not to say there haven't been other tiny differences, but some of them are like, is this a difference or is it just something that happened and we didn't see it, right? Like, who's to say they didn't do the big chili off in Chapter 1 as well and we just didn't have time to get around to showing it because there's other stuff going on, right? Could have just been another day at school. There's no inconsistency there.
Their school. This is just a regular Tuesday at their school.
So I thought it was a weird thing in this, and then I started watching My Hime, and one of the episodes is just a big one of the teachers getting up there and being like, "Hey, let's everyone make a cake and try to impress us." And I'm like, "All right, is this just a genre of shonenism? Is that?"
Did you have cooking home ec?
No. What the fuck? No.
Wait, you didn't have cooking home ec
I didn't
growing
have home
up?
ec.
Is that like not normal anymore?
Maybe. Let us know if it's normal for you. I didn't have home ec growing up in the area I was in going to school in the 90s. But you did?
In the same area in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah.
You had been, weird.
Actually, wait. They even still had a home ec teacher at the high school we went to, although I don't think either of us took it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might be the case. That might have been an elective or something at that point.
But like they had us do a class when I was in middle school.
Oh yeah,
where you had to like learn to cook some basic meals and learn to sew to repair a torn piece of clothing.
I'm going to be honest.
So like a cooking competition, that just didn't strike me as weird. And then I'm realizing that like, oh, that actually is weird nowadays. But
yeah, I'm going to be honest. That sounds like a really useful thing.
it is. Want to know a fun fact?
Yes.
That's what my mom went to college for. She specifically went into training to be a home ec teacher just before the home ec boom stopped. It was a huge thing when she was like becoming a young adult and considering college. It was a thing that like in this area, they were like, yeah, every school's going to have this in the future and it's going to be a huge thing going forward. And they did for a while, but then it died out.
I think that really speaks to like what we expect our schools to do. Like, I think if we really expected our schools to be things that prepared our kids to be like good citizens on a national sense, that would be something we include, because like learning how to live your life safely, comfortably, and well includes having a set of just basic ass skills that, you know, maybe you get taught them at home, maybe you don't, but like it's not a bad thing to have someone tell you like, here's how you cook pasta. Here's how you bake a goddamn cake.
So much stuff that's missing, like that, or like, oh, what do you do in like the doorknobs falling off your door and the screw came out? How do you put it back on? And when do you call a handyman? Or, oh, how do you have a psychologically healthy relationship with people? Or, oh, how do you do your taxes? All this stuff that's really missing.
It sounds so fucking, like, if your parents teach you, like, that's one thing, but like there's a lot of things I never learned growing up. And maybe that speaks to my upbringing, but like being an adult has also been a constant series of learning how to do things for myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's not always true. I don't, and it's different from like the way I kind of talk about it in wistful terms about how I learned both cursive and typing classes, right?
Yeah.
But like, you don't need to learn cursive anymore. You don't. It's fun, but you don't. But no. I think it's the official stance of APR to bring back home ec.
Apparently so. Apparently that's what we're coming down on here.
That if we as a nation expect you to pay your taxes, we should be teaching our kids how that works.
Yep.
Maybe they don't need to learn that till they're in high school, right? But like, if you're in high school, you shouldn't be able to graduate unless you know how to pay taxes.
Or better yet, paying taxes just shouldn't be hard. It's purely optional that it's hard. They didn't have to make it hard.
That is also true. That's a whole separate thing, but like it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to pay someone a large sum of money to do it for you. You shouldn't have to pay hundreds of dollars to get software that does it for you. Other countries like go out of their way to make it easier for you to pay your taxes by like bringing that stuff to you and making it as easy as possible. That's just another way that we as a country have kind of let capitalism ruin everything. I think it's also the stance of APR that we are anti-capitalism. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I don't expect a whole lot of pushback on that from our audience. We've done a very good job cultivating our audience in that way, I do think. But surprise. Anyway, that was a tangent.
Yeah, that was quite a tangent.
Anyway, what I'm saying is bring back home ec. Typing classes are good, and also maybe social media / internet literacy. That seems more important now than it did when we were growing up.
Perhaps so.
Or just like literacy of like how to tell when something's bullshit, how to have a sufficiently skeptical view when you're reading something. Be like, okay, how can I verify this? How can I look up more about this? Especially in the age where like you can just generate AI slop to say whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm on a real tangent. I'm like on a tangent of a tangent now. Yeah. This is great.
I was going to say, you call it out as a tangent and you start wrapping it up and then immediately spin a new one
into
out.
Another tangent. You know, people like to listen to us talk. Who am I?
Yeah.
And this, I want to point out, this is again all relates back to what we were talking about.
What was that? What are we talking
about? What we
about?
expect from our schools.
I see.
What we expect what we expect of people as citizens, what we expect of people changes over time, and how the world they live in changes. Boom, brought it back.
Anyway, what was the question I asked you?
I don't know.
All right, let's go from the tangent immediately into a head-on collision with a really long and big question.
Sure.
So this is a 3-parter
from
Lulu on Discord.
All right.
So the first part is, what's up with Rika?
Rika seems like someone who has had a lot of maturity and responsibility forced on her at a very young age. She has had to grow up very quickly in more ways than one, and is in a way that's kind of remarkable. You'd expect that something like that would make her more cynical or dour, but she is a remarkably happy and chipper person for someone who's taking care of both her and Satoko, and whose parents are dead, and is also the local religious leader.
Yep.
Like, that is a huge amount of responsibility to put on someone who is a middle schooler. Someone who physically struggles to lift the ceremonial hoe, right? She physically struggles to carry out her responsibilities, and yet she does it anyway, and she does it with a smile.
Like,
and
imagine if the bishop for your local Catholic diocese was a 10-year-old orphan.
Right. And we're not just talking about like the preacher being like, what's that one kid that had the film made about him? The kid preacher guy. You know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I have no idea what you're referring to.
Someone in the comment section can remind me what it is. It's not just like she's a figurehead who comes out and does sermons. Like, no, she has actual adult responsibility in addition to taking care of another human being. She is, I guess, an emancipated minor, which is a horrifying thing to say at her age.
I mean, is she even?
She has no parent. Yeah, right. Is she even? If not, who's her guardian?
Yeah, like, who's paying attention? They're out in the boonies. Maybe Child Protective Services knows nothing about this.
Yeah. Because she lives in not a home. Although I guess that part is by her choice.
Yeah.
Like, she elects not to live in her family home for reasons, but still, that's not, on the face of it, that ain't healthy. So yeah, what's up with Rika is that she is someone who has had way too much responsibility thrust on her too young, and out of necessity for survival has had to learn how to do these things. And despite all that, still keeps on a smile, and I think that is so sad.
What about her syringe? What's up with that?
Yeah, she was straight up gonna murk Shion. Straight up. Well, she had... I don't know where she got it, but given how she's like a full-ass adult...
Maybe she's on fucking ketamine therapy for complex PTSD. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe? I mean, here's the thing is that, like, she is a full-ass adult. Like in how she is able to, or in how she must navigate the world, right? I have no problem believing that if needs must, she would find a way to either just within her capacity as someone who's the head of the three families to find a syringe with some needlessly debilitating chemical in it. Apparently the Sonozakis can get their hands on it. Why not her? Why not? Still reeling from the double blind that the syringe was actually real, if I'm honest. Chapter 1.
Or was it?
But what if... Stop this.
We don't know if that wasn't Rika there with the syringe.
True. But, like, most reasonable explanation right now is that it is indeed real in Chapter 1, which is silly.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know where she gets it from, but again, she's a full-ass adult and a community leader. I have no doubt that she has connections or people she could talk to about that. Yeah. That's what I think about that.
There's just a horse trank vault in the back of the ritual storehouse.
Listen, it doesn't have to be there. I mean, we don't know what's in the first room of the ritual storehouse. Shion didn't want anyone to see it. But man, I don't know. They've got murder basements. How is murder basements a thing, and then yet syringe full of horse tranquilizer strains credulity? Huh? That's what I need to ask you. Is like, if we can just accept that murder basement exists, how come I need to justify horse tranquilizer to you?
Okay. Bold but fair. I accept it. Then let's answer the next part of this 3-parter.
Okay.
Which is, what's up with Rika, the Umineko spoilers / speculation version.
Okay, here we go. So, this is also going to be in the Umineko spoiler section, so you can go to the end of the video if you want to listen to this part. All right. What's next on the list?
All right. Let's go to one from Lapis Lazarite on YouTube.
Sweet.
Is there an explanation on the focus or lack thereof on Rena in this chapter? If we're going to by Shmion's jealousy as a motive, why is Rena not an explicit target, to the point where Shmion severely underestimated her abilities? Shmion did see Keiichi giving Rena the doll, so wouldn't she be a target sooner or later, even if the focus was put on Keiichi first?
I think it's because Rena's a conspirator, a co-conspirator with Shion in this case. I think she has to be in order for things in that chapter to work out the way they do. Rena very cautiously being like, no, you don't need to show us the tattoo when she clearly doesn't have it on her, allows her to have the visible willingness to show it off, but not have to actually do it. Because if she were to show it, then we would know for sure whether or not that's Shion or Mion. But thankfully, Rena stops her. Rena's also the one that clues her in that, like, hey, we do have mics on, so you can, help sell this over the mic now to the police that this is Mion. It also adds, like I talked about this earlier, but also adds an interesting color to the scene at the end of chapter 1 with purportedly Mion and Rena about to stab Keiichi, right, with the needle. But yeah, I think I don't have the full scope of why out yet, but I think they're conspirators. And I don't think that means they're working at cross purposes, because while Rena, I think, does have feelings for Keiichi, I think her feelings are more based around, I don't want people to leave. I don't want these things to change. It's less that she wants Keiichi romantically, and more that she wants Keiichi to stay.
If you want someone to stay, why'd you kill him?
So he can't leave.
They've left this mortal coil.
Yeah, but their body is always going to be there. They're never going to leave now. They're never going to have a chance to leave and move on with their life. I'm not saying she's rational.
Okay. so this is a Rena is like,
I'm saying that
Shion tier disturbed right now.
Well, we do know that, like, allegedly some of the stuff in her past that she's done, right? That like the explanation we got for that was unsatisfying, as I talked about last time. But I don't think it's wrong to believe that there is something going on with her that would make her have the capacity to do something that drastic. And I think her desire for people not to leave means that she would rather they die, have their corpses stay here, than have them leave her and go on to other parts of their lives. I am. That's my understanding of Rena's character right now.
Okay.
Is that's what's motivating her. And that's also why she's not a threat to Shion, because she doesn't necessarily care for Keiichi romantically. There's definitely a level of intimacy to their friendship and how and what they're willing to do for each other. Like, she's willing to be there for him and make him meals and stuff when he needs it. She's like, clearly when things are going right, she's a good friend. And and perhaps like a very deep friend to Keiichi. But that doesn't mean that when the chips are down, she wouldn't rather kill him than see him leave. And I think that's also why Rena's the one who shows up at the very end during the middle of the night to stab Keiichi to get the last one that she wanted.
How do you figure that?
Well, it's the middle of the night. Keiichi ain't doing well.
He'd mistake Rena for Mion or Shion?
Well, here's the thing. It can't be Mion or Shion.
Why can't it?
We know both of them are dead at that point.
Do we?
Shion's body falls from the thing there, and her body is declared dead at that time. That could be wrong. We'll get to that in a second. Mion's body has been at the bottom of the well for weeks at this point. It can't be Mion. It would have to be Shion.
Okay. Do we know that the time of death what do we know about that?
So, let me see if I have this in my notes somewhere. I don't know if I took this down or just made a note that this was a,
because this is one of those things that I've heard you bring up a couple times, but I feel like we've never got to, like, what makes you say that about the times of death?
Oh, this is the wrong notebook. Sorry, that was my personal notebook and not my mystery notebook. According to what Oishi tells Keiichi, the person that I am going to say is Shion. Because Mion's body has been dead, right? And it also explains Shion's reaction to hearing that name and all that stuff like that. That's kind of all along with her. She died on that day, right?
Yeah.
So, it's not physically without of the realm of reason to be like, she went to Hinamizawa stabbed Keiichi, went back, and then her bodyguard invented a story about her having a loud argument, then jumped to her death. But I think if we think about how many steps and how many illogical, like, she has no real reason to go through all of that. It just doesn't seem sensible. I think the more sensible situation is that Shion did indeed jump to her death, and the person who is stabbing Keiichi that night is neither Shion nor Mion. If it was Shion, she would have had some reaction, I think, to the doll. Especially considering that she's specifically isolated that doll as the thing that made things go the way they went. Even if it was just like a sly little, like, it's too late for that now.
Is stabbing a reaction?
She came there willing to stab him. The stabbing was going to happen either way. The stabbing was going to happen no matter what. I'm saying that she would have remarked upon the doll and being like, "Oh, it's too late to make that up now, Keiichi," or something like that. But she had no reaction to it, which means she had no context for what that doll meant. Kind of by process of elimination, unless we want to guess it's either Threon or fuck it, I don't know. Maybe the mayor's daughter has green hair. But given what she says, finally I got everyone I wanted to get. And it happens just before Keiichi is set to leave Hinamizawa for good. I think it's likely that that's Rena. And that also kind of works with Rena being the conspirator. And also kind of fits with Rena's whole murderous attitude, being like, "You're not going to leave me too, are you, Keiichi?" from chapter 1, right? Because that's why her whole murder thing happens, because she's like, "I don't want you to leave me." She's very explicit about what she's afraid of.
Okay.
But yeah.
One more thing to prod at then.
Okay, hit me.
Why would she help out in a scheme that killed everybody else and ruined everything when they weren't trying to leave?
Well, now they can never leave.
Well, they weren't trying to. Wouldn't all things being equal, it'd be better for them to be here and alive? It seems kind of odd that you've got schemes, you've got motives for both Rena and Shion, but those motives seem pretty different. They seem to be rather conflicting, don't they?
I don't know. I think some of that requires more insight into how Shion thinks about this. Maybe it is as simple as, if they're dead, they can never leave, and that's good enough for her and how she conceives of it. Maybe some of it is we don't fully understand what goes on between the two of them. Maybe the argument goes something like, "Hey, my sister, she's going to inherit the family, and that means she's going to take on responsibilities and necessarily have to grow out of Hinamizawa."
Yep.
You know what I mean? Maybe the argument goes something like that between the two of them. I don't have a great answer for it yet. I have like some rough ideas, but it feels like there's some key understanding missing there. And I will fully admit that. I do think that there is some key understanding about why the two of them would collaborate with one another that is missing there. Maybe that'll become more visible in later chapters. Maybe I'm just not putting some pieces together. I do still think they're conspirators. But you are absolutely right that I am missing like the key link that kind of makes their things line up enough that they would fire in the same direction. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, I concede the point.
All right. Let's grab another one from Volition on Discord.
Yo!
Japanese wordplay has featured in Higurashi, such as with the characters appearing in the names of Sonozaki branch members and the possible double meaning behind the name Watanagashi.
Yep.
Has it been difficult to try approaching the game from that angle, especially when some words and characters might be more associated with this game, and searching them online might lead to spoilers?
Absolutely. I will admit, I have just kind of... I don't want to say I've given up on this, but the fact of the matter is I don't speak Japanese. I don't have enough fluency with the characters to get anything other than what the game is trying to tell me. Knowing a little bit, I won't spoil anything, but knowing a little bit about how Umineko chose with these same things, I'm not sure that I need to know a whole lot in order to like get some of the surface level stuff. Like I have the character for Demon in my notes now, and I'll be looking out for that, and I've, that kind of thing. But it feels bad to say, but yeah, I've more or less conceded that this is one angle of attack that I'm not going to be able to really go into that deeply. That said, if one other thing from Umineko, there's one other lesson Umineko taught me, is that no one avenue of attack is going to be sufficient to get the whole picture. But also leaving out one, you can still get the full result while completely missing some things. So while it does sound bad to say like I've conceded on this front, I don't think that precludes me from being able to get to the heart of things.
Fair enough.
I'm not me saying I concede on this front is not the same as me saying I give in to defeat. It's just saying that I have to work extra hard using the other methods that are available to me. Right. And again, that's not to say that like, I might not come up with a random stretch thing here or there, but if it's specifically wordplay double meaning, I'm gonna have to wait till the game tells us.
Yep.
But if it's looking out for specific characters, I might have I do have the tools to maybe make some headway there. It's kind of dour to admit that, but like I feel like that's less admission of defeat and more like I can't learn Japanese to that level of fluency within this amount of time. So I'll use what I can and I'll have to try even harder to compensate.
We can put Duolingo on your phone.
I am so close to actually doing that. I need you to know this. The thing is, like, I've got, I do want to at some point. I've had a couple of things on my mind that really, like, have prevented me from having the bandwidth to dedicate to something. Because, like, if I do a Duolingo thing or something like that, I want to make sure that it's not something I drop.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I have the bandwidth to commit to it. And right now, I have one particularly big project that as soon as that's done and settled and finally out the door, I feel like I'm going to, like, have a large weight off my chest and finally the time to work on, to add in something like that to my life. But that's more of like a personal Eskay thing. And if you're wondering what that is, you'll find out soon. Or you've seen me posting about it all the time on co-host, one or the other.
Let's grab another question from Discord. Aleph Alpha asks, any thoughts on what life is like for the characters post-episodes, since it's far less clear-cut?
Post-episodes. Well, if we look at episode 2, it kind of goes on a lot further than episode 1 did in terms of time, and like life just kind of seems to go on. You know what I mean?
Folks die in horrible murders. Life keeps happening for everybody else who didn't get murdered.
Like, but really though, because what else can you do but keep going?
Yeah.
I think the kind of dour version is that things just move on. And given how things happen in some of these chapters, I think like the big question mark in the future is whether or not the dam project comes back in full force. I think there is some little bit of inevitability to it. Like even after on my theory, even after the Watanagashi murderers finally run out of people that they're willing to kill, is that enough to keep the dam away in perpetuity, or does the dam just come back as soon as they then forget about it, right? It's still, the whole charade seems kind of like a desperate stopgap at best. We talked about this earlier, like the inevitability of modernization, like it will come for everyone. And I think the truth of it is that one way or another, like for the people who are left, life is just going to have to go on. They're probably going to wind up moving away from town. The town's going to get flooded for a big dam project, and this whole history will eventually be forgotten.
Other than being memorialized.
Can we say that? Is that a... Yeah, I think we could say that. Other than being memorialized by the... So, yeah, I don't know that I have a better answer than that. I haven't really considered it, to be quite honest, and maybe that's just a failing in how I'm looking at at this stuff. But my answer was more or less that, like, probably in the end they wind up losing. The dam probably will come eventually, and that everything that happens in the meantime is more or less a stopgap. Eventually, like, Hinamizawa, one way or another, is going to meet its end, and whether that's because the whole scheme implodes because it gets overtaken by Shion in 1 year, or if it's because they run out of victims in their willing circle and then have to rely on the specter of it for the years to come, and eventually that fear fades as well. I think this all ends when the dam goes up.
Fair
dour?
enough.
That feels dour. But I do think that's how it ends.
All right. Let's get another question.
Yo, there were a lot of them this time. Hell yeah.
There are a ton. That's why I put them up front.
Hell yeah.
Lapis Lazarite from YouTube asks, what do you think is Shmion's motive for killing her grandma and the mayor?
Okay. I think that one's easier to figure out.
Yeah?
Because if it is Shion, like I'm speculating it is, then it's about power. Presumably, Oryou is one of the few people who would know enough to tell the two of them apart. You know what I mean? She's been raising Mion for some time and teaching her things. She knows Mion's finer sensibilities. And that's not uncommon with identical twins, right? Where even their parents are able to tell them apart still. So I have a feeling that if she wanted to go about her plan to usurp Mion's position with the family, she would have to kill Oryou. Oryou, from what we know, is she does get out on occasion. Like, right, we hear her going to lessons in the assembly hall and all that. She's not fully locked away or infirm or whatnot. She lives enough of a life that would be a loose end. Right?
Yep.
And as for the mayor, I feel like the mayor, because he is one of the heads of the other three families, right? Him and Rika. Maybe the mayor also has some more intimate contact with the head of the Sonozakis than we know about.
I feel like we even heard that explicitly. That's like the Sonozaki girls had been had connections with the mayor growing up.
Yeah,
and also that the mayor is like
a father to Shion, right?
Yeah.
So weirdly enough, I think that means that she has to kill the mayor then. Because if the mayor knows her well enough where she feels he's a father, he is also one person that would note that something is wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So still, as much as that sucks, that does mean that if she wants to pull this off, she has to kill like the people who would be able to reliably tell them apart. And I think that would really be it, aside from maybe her bodyguard. I don't know if her bodyguard ever says that he can't tell them apart or not. But also, he seems like a willing enough accomplice, making up a story about the two of them fighting. So, you know, whatever. That's my motive for her killing Oryou, is that she is a loose end who would, and the mayor as well, that they are loose ends that would necessarily be like among the few number of people who would be able to easily or readily tell that something was wrong. Maybe not immediately, maybe not right away, but they are the ones who over time would be the ones that would break it open.
All right. Lulu from the Discord asks, Eskay's been rightfully skeptical of everything that's being presented to us or Keiichi as the narrative. However, in other When They Cry works, even if a narrative is factually untrue, there could still be thematic truths in what's being presented. In that regard, what could you take away from Watanagashi?
I think that's a hard question to answer without spoiling some of Umineko.
Yeah?
Well, specifically in the way that they phrased it. So, how about we move this question to the Umineko spoilers section?
Okay.
So I can be a bit more explicit in what I'm talking about here.
Let's do it.
Okay.
So, you've made it through all of the tough grill you on the events questions from folks, but we've got some fun questions from folks.
Oh, I like fun questions.
I think we
Those
should
are
do some
fun.
fun questions
I like
before we
fun
get into
stuff.
my wrap-up stuff.
All right.
So Aleph Alpha asks, with your knowledge of Umineko, how does Higurashi line up so far with expectations created by Umineko, both metatextually but also by the direct references to it?
Okay.
How do you feel in relation?
That's cool. And obviously, this is a question that's
Back
going to go
to
in the Umineko spoiler
containment
section.
zone.
Yeah, back to the Umineko containment zone. This is going to be fun to edit. We didn't have to do any Umineko spoiler stuff for the first chapter, but
Really?
it's yeah. I got through the entire chapter 1 discussion without discussing Umineko spoilers, but people are asking specifically about it this time.
Okay.
So like, it's going to require a little bit more futzing.
All right. Next fun question.
I like fun.
Update from Artificial Devil on Discord. Update on who both your favorite characters are so far and why.
Both my favorite characters?
Both of us.
Both of us. Oh, right. Okay. Still Satoko.
All right.
Because she's a little gremlin and she should be able to murder someone if she wants to.
As a treat.
As a treat. I think I like Satoko because I'm sure she has her own stuff going on, but like from the outside, she seems to objectively have the worst end of the stick.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's still there, smiling, trying to make friends is heartening, even more so than it is with Rika, I think. Because Rika, which I don't like apples, like I don't, it's not the trauma Olympics over here, right? But I like I see Satoko, I see what she's gone through, and I just want her to be happy. And I like that she's decided that the way to cope with her life is to make Keiichi's life miserable, and also she needs Keiichi around because she needs her big brother. And I feel that. I feel that. However, Mio has moved up into a very close second. Learning more about like what her deal is, and that she's kind of like like an author character who is writing about things and interested in the folklore of this area. That has certainly like raised my awareness of her, and I also like that she's just a shit.
Yeah.
She is so willfully mean to Shion and Keiichi. It's like I love it. I love them. It's great. How about you, honey? Who are your favorite? Well, you see, you know what happens, broad strokes in the whole thing. So.
Yeah. But I haven't experienced this perspective on them.
Right, because you saw the
I saw the anime.
Right.
So I think my answers are still the same as last time. I'm pretty sure I gave this answer last time, which is I love Mio. She sucks. She's great.
Yep.
I also just think Mion is neat.
Mion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mion sells us a sword in the basement. Yeah, if you watch that episode, you know. You know. Neat. The bourbon's hitting. All right, hit me.
I see. All right. So, actually, this one is apparently directed at me now that I read it.
Oh, sweet.
From Fawful999 on Discord. Same as last time, I will be asking for Vivian's thoughts on what differences between the anime and VN they thought were interesting.
Ooh, this is really good.
Yeah.
Can you do this in a way without spoiling me, or do you want me to like close my ears for a bit?
No, absolutely.
Okay, go for it.
So, I think the biggest thing for me is the way that background details are trickled in and more broad context on things gets brought in. It's hard to do that in the anime format in the same way that the VN does with its repeated like breaks to read side materials and all of these longer conversations with folks about past lore of the town and so on. I feel like, oh, hey, it didn't explode this time. Congratulations.
Thank you. My science juice didn't explode.
I feel like the VN version of things is just way better at painting that picture of Hinamizawa's history and culture and where these events are happening in the context of the broader town, rather than just following, here's the hijinks of this particular cast of characters as these bad things happen to them.
Yeah, like, again, I haven't seen the Higurashi anime, but I know it by reputation, and that reputation is that it kind of highlights the more sensational slasher horror aspects of it, kind of at the expense of a lot of other elements of it. Which I don't know if that's right or wrong, but like it's successful in a way that people seem to enjoy. So if it gets them in the door to read the VN, then hey.
I think the other thing is the VN just makes me like Takano more, because she's there for like the blink of an eye in the anime, because it's just like, oh, shows up at Watanagashi, dies. Same thing with Tomitake, shows up at Watanagashi, dies. This gives us a lot more time with that duo than the anime did, and a lot more time to percolate on what the fuck their whole deal is, and why this maladjusted lady is telling the most awful ghost stories to children that she had help her break into a fucking church's sacred storage thing.
Are you going to ask me about Mio later?
Maybe.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
You can't know. It's a mystery.
Okay, just if you're not going to ask me about Mio, I want to talk about Mio.
I totally will.
Okay, good.
This is the for fun questions.
Cool.
So there's one more for fun question.
Oh yeah,
I think you'll like this one in particular. So from Volition on Discord, has any other non-RO7 media that may have been influenced by Higurashi informed how you approach this title?
Yep.
I feel like this question is laser targeted at Eskay.
Yep. For better or worse, I am a fan of repetitive serial narratives. If you have perhaps... I know you know about this because you have a first-hand view for this, but I have a project coming out later this year that'll probably make that some of that influence a lot more clear. But yeah, reading stuff, like, as a huge fan of time loop stories, unabashedly so. I love these kind of narratives where we see the same events over and over again, and what we then have to learn about them. I think the big difference between a lot of those other events, a lot of those other narratives that seem influenced by Higurashi and what came after, and Higurashi itself, is that our point of view character is not any wiser for all of this iteration. Keiichi doesn't. Keiichi isn't Okabe Rintaro, right? He doesn't know.
He doesn't have reading
Steiner.
Steiner.
He does not have reading Steiner. That's not a spoiler, right? That's like setup stuff for Steins Gate. Yeah, it is. Okay. Just double check. As much as I want to talk about Steins Gate like people know what it is, I don't actually want to spoil important parts of it, but no, that is setup.
Setup that still happens like a good third of the way or more into the game
okay, that's fine.
Because of the structure of that work.
But I mean, but you also bring up a good point. Steins Gate also feels the need to kind of like settle into a rhythm first with this kind of like
slice of life stuff before hitting you with the sci-fi,
before hitting you with the high concept stuff, right? And that's kind of, and I have to feel like Higurashi had some hand in that as well. Not just in the serial repetitive narrative aspect of it, but in the aspect of like slice of life that gets slowly thrown. So slice of life stuff that helps you get ingratiated with the character that slowly gets thrown off kilter by the impingement of other larger high concept stuff. One of my favorite series of all time that just got an anime adaptation this season, Dead Demons DDDD Destruction, also works on this formula. It starts out as a like largely slice of life thing that has one big draw event at the beginning of it. There's the fucking huge ass UFO over Tokyo. But for the large part of the beginning of the story is about high school girls going on with their lives, looking like, where are we going to go to college? How are things going to happen? Kind of in the shadow as things slowly start to go more and more wrong. Go read D8 or watch the ONA. It's really good. Glad I got that in there. In that case, I feel like it's almost like Seinfeld, right? Where it feels like a lot of stories that have come after it really explicitly lean on this formula. I know that there are some games that feel like they're almost laser targeted as like Higurashi, but again, I'm thinking about a recent VN that came out that had a lot of folks saying this just feels like Higurashi, but again, it was a game called I don't know if it's fair or not. I haven't played it myself yet, but it's a game called Raging Loop.
I'm so hyped to play that.
I'm hyped to play it too.
If it is just Higurashi, but again, and slightly worse, like some people are telling me, that's still fine. I will still buy and enjoy the hell out of it if that's true. So it can only go up from there.
Right, exactly. Again, I don't want my words to be taken as impingement or anything like that. Clearly, this is my thing, and I am all about this.
I cannot tell you how many times I have wanted a thing to just be discount Higurashi, and then it wasn't. So if this just is that, then bam, I'm eating well.
Right? Exactly. Clearly, though, Higurashi has had a huge influence on things that come after it. And I'm actually, as someone who likes consuming and media and putting it in kind of the context of things that have influenced it and things that it has influenced, I am really looking forward to having this particular section of my knowledge filled in.
Yeah.
Because Higurashi really has had a huge impact on a lot of things that have come after it. It also kind of came out in the golden era, the golden age of Denpa VNs, didn't it? Like, that really did feel like that was the best time to be writing a Denpa VN. I know that there have been some really good ones that have come out more after that point. Shout outs to our friends at Milk Plus Visual for writing Soundless. But it really does feel like it's kind of it does feel like a watershed game in that sense. Like there definitely feels like a lot of games that come after it owe some debt to it, whether from playing the game or watching the anime. And I'm really excited actually to have that filled in, because obviously, like, again, this is a area of story that I love and continue to love and continue to and aspire to working in myself. Again, project coming out later this year. I'm gonna keep hyping myself up if that's cool with you.
Yeah. Go for it.
Did I answer the original question? I feel like I got off on a tangent.
You did.
No, was that... I did get off on a tangent?
No, you answered it.
I answered the original question.
Yeah.
Okay. Somewhere in there was your answer. Whoa. My science juices.
Yeah, the question was just how has other non-RO7 media influenced how you approach this? So that whole thing wasn't a tangent at all. That was just that. That was just an answer.
That was just an answer. Yeah. That was just an answer.
Nothing wrong with your answer.
Yeah.
So...
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you've wrapped up what you want to say about the fun stuff here?
About the fun stuff?
Like other media comparisons and so on?
I don't know what else I would say in the fun stuff area. It was nice to get to play this game with a close approximation of the original OST. I know it's not the same. I know the version we're playing is not the same as the original, but I also know it's like the best we're going to get. So. That was nice. That I felt like having the correct audio or a better version of the audio added a lot more to it. Especially that one royalty-free track called, what was it, Fascism? That was really good. Oh, it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm like, wow, yeah, this is, yep, that's good. Can I do one other fun time thing?
What?
The mini games really feel like such a useless concession. I feel like that's mean to say. Maybe there's some deeper meaning to them, but holy shit, the mini games really feel like RO7 needed another reason to get people to buy the games and play them. Right? Am I wrong to say that?
I mean, all of the other releases of this game more recently haven't had them in there, so make of that what you will.
Yeah, they definitely feel superfluous. We're going to keep playing them because I want to, and that's a good enough reason. I do want to get as complete an experience as we can, and that includes the parts of it that maybe got jettisoned later. But they definitely, like, after playing a few of them, I can definitely understand why they're not considered essential reading.
Yep.
They're fun. There's some cute stuff hiding in there. But yeah, they're definitely not adding anything to the experience other than making my hand hurt from clicking a lot. And also making us learn about who that one character was that was stealing all the stuff out of Angel Mort.
Yeah.
Other things. I don't know that this is a fun thing, but I feel like with chapter 2 now, I finally have an idea of how I really want to approach this, thinking about this game.
Okay.
I don't know that it's a fun thing. Is this something you're going to ask me about, or should I just talk?
That wasn't one.
Okay.
But yeah, feel free if you got
chapter
stuff.
1, I was clearly going in with the Umineko mindset of like try to like solve the mystery and stuff. And people were telling me like that's not going to be a useful way of looking at it. I'm like, I get that. You know, it was the only real lens I had at the time. But now that we've seen another chapter, and I still feel like the close reading was helpful, I think I'm getting a better idea of what to expect here and how I can best, and what I'm best able to get out of things. And I think what we're going to be seeing, and as we go forward, is that each chapter seems to be revealing a different part of the large piece of the community puzzle that is Hinamizawa. I think that's the important part to this, is that we're not uncovering bits of a mystery. Like there obviously is like a central like conspiracy here to the Watanagashi deaths. But what's more important, I think, is to figure out what pieces of the community puzzle are we missing, and what are we likely to see more of in the future. So, like for example, chapter 1 did allude to a second Sonozaki sister, and also kind of allude to the Sonozaki's power. And this chapter kind of expounds on that particular piece of the puzzle into the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're nominally centered around one of the girls, which I think is the easier way to. But like, they uses I think it's going to keep using each of the girls as kind of like a focus point to then expand upon a different part of the community. I expect going forward, we're going to see a lot more about the Kimiyoshis and the Furudes. Furudes will probably come with when we get like. I expect they might actually get kind of tied in together, kind of like what the other two members of the three families are up to. Like I think the Kimiyoshi's daughter is going to wind up being a character probably, in the way that Shion has now become a character. I think we're going to see a lot more. I think we're going to see a lot more of. We've been getting bits and pieces of it, but I feel like we'll get a little bit more of like what Oishi's actual interest in everything is. We get some really tantalizing scenes, but I feel like that's still not enough to fully get like everything that he's about. I think we're going to get some more chapters that focus in on other aspects of the community that we've neglected until now. Like somehow we're going to have to get a chapter that just talks about like, I've talked about how like the community is a character in this, and I feel like there's going to have to be a chapter where the community of Hinamizawa is the featured character. As little sense as that makes. We're probably also going to get a chapter that focuses more on Mio and the historical aspect of it. We got some of that in here, but I feel like there's a bit more to explore there. Really, I want to zero in on the Kimiyoshi's daughters. That seems like an important character that's kind of on the periphery of this chapter. Who would have played a much larger part in other chapters as well if we had known they were around. Kind of like Shion. It really feels like there's some contortion in these to not reveal too many characters too early. Which is fine, I get it. But like,
what, you're telling me Ryukishi is going to surprise us with another character when we don't think it's going to happen all the way until the end of the game? Who would do that?
Are you?
Whoever would do that?
I liked how we were still getting that in Umineko, like straight up until the very end of the last extra side story. It's just dude can't help himself. He's got characters, but more so than Umineko. because this is a story about a community, I think there's that kind of lends itself naturally, right?
Mhm.
It's impossible for one person to fully know an entire community of people. Like we just like what was it that studies have been done with people, and we have like a maximum amount of people that we can show intimate empathy towards, in the sense that like we can only intimately care about so many people in our lives before it's just too much in the sense that like we can't spare the time to think and differentiate them. Not in the sense that like we can't care that something terrible has happened, but like you can only have so many close friends at once.
If you want to learn more about this, look up Dunbar's number.
There we go.
To get the pro and con take on how well that explains humans and our ways of interacting.
I will just quick note here. This is something I haven't looked up since I was like much younger, so I don't know if this has been proven to be pseudoscience or not. It may well have been, but I'm just going with what I got on me right now. Don't take it as gospel. Look stuff up on your own, please. But yeah, I feel like that necessarily means that there's going to be a lot of characters that we just don't have time with yet. Maybe there's going to be a chapter where Keiichi gets like really involved in civics. Keiichi joins the town hall.
Gets really into town meetings.
I think we're going to have a chapter where the Maibaras are featured as well. It feels weird that they're kind of on the periphery, like that for being so closely related to Keiichi. We know very, very little for firm about like what they do. And it's still really suspicious. But I have a feeling we're going to get a chapter where maybe things come a bit closer to home and we start seeing more about the Maibaras.
Have you ever gone to town meeting?
No. Can't say that I have.
When I was in, I think, middle school, our social studies teacher was talking it up as being like a kind of unique thing in our region.
Yeah.
And encouraged us to attend. So I attended a couple. They were very boring. I was far too young to be sitting in on town meeting while folks argued about zoning regulations. But it was also kind of cool that just any old schmo could show up and participate in the civic process.
This sounds silly, but after we wind up moving, that's something I do want to get more involved in. As dumb as that sounds, like, because we're finally on the cusp of being able to afford to move somewhere, which is fucking life-changing. I never thought that would happen. I'm not going to do a whole sidebar on it now because it's not important, but like, when we do wind up settling down somewhere that's not a shitty apartment where the landlord won't ever return our calls, I do want to try to get more involved in the community itself.
Make things a little bit better than they were before you got there.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, what makes a community better than two Let's Players? Oh, I've said that out loud and now it's like, oh.
What can improve a community's bonds more than bringing in two homosexuals with debilitating anxiety?
Right?
That's all it really takes to really tie a community together.
Revitalize your community. Get your homosexuals' anxiety. All right, what do we got?
All right. So, I got some wrap-up questions for you.
Wrap-up questions with the sound of rain in the background? That sounds awesome. I hope the rain comes through. I hope you get to hear the rain now. It sounds really nice and comforting.
So, I'm going to dig in on not too many, but a few places that I feel like didn't get covered in the viewer questions and are worth chatting about a bit more.
Sure.
So the first of these
that was too close.
Is about Shmion's confession.
Shmion's confession.
Yeah. What is up with that? We get a confession that I, Mion Sonozaki, am responsible for these crimes and for all of the previous Watanagashi murders, which are all connected, and this is part of it.
Yep.
Why that?
So half of that, again, I believe can be explained by her realizing she's on mic, right, with the police on one end, that they can't differentiate which Sonozaki is which. That's as good as the confession is they're ever going to get, that this will all get placed on Mion, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other half of it, I think, is to be a little bit misleading by purposely trying to tie it into the rest of the events. Whereas I feel pretty confident that Shion hijacking the plot is unrelated to the annual Watanagashi murders.
To be misleading to who?
To anyone trying to focus in on these events and maybe the police, for example, give them the finally end explanation they've been looking for, or at least enough of an end explanation that they can't go looking into it anymore. And by taking this answer as Mion did it, they don't get to find out what the actual truth was. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. I am not discounting the fact that Mion may have been involved in the annual Watanagashi murders. I still think that is 100% on the table. I don't know that I trust that coming from the mouth of Shion Sonozaki given her motivations in that moment, though.
Yeah.
I think in that moment, her motivations are more that she needs to make sure her sister's name is the one that takes the blame for this, rather than revealing some deep and important truth about the history of these events. It may coincidentally be true, but I don't know that I would trust her in that moment to be the one to tell me. I'm not discounting it. In fact, I believe it's very likely that Mion is involved. But I don't think it's just her. I think it's more likely that it's a group of people.
Okay. Do you think the what do you think of the revelation that they have a whole murder basement and hidden tunnels and a body dump? Does that tie into anything?
It's the Sonozakis are the head of the local kink scene. No one wants to talk about it because no one wants to admit that they're part of the local kink scene.
So it's a for fun torture dungeon.
It's a for fun torture.
Okay.
No. Okay. Here's the thing. They're Yakuza. I am okay believing that they have a reason for this. I don't believe that they made the bunker, but I believe that they probably retrofitted it, or maybe something that their grandfather did. Whoever it was that was originally involved with military science, right? I don't have a problem believing that this place exists. Whether or not it was, I think it's most likely it was retrofitted to purpose rather than explicitly made for purpose. But that's just me. That's just me guessing at things. Knowing that it exists pretty definitively, I think gives some more credence to the idea that that on some level they believe that doing these horrible things will somehow benefit the town, even if by wishful thinking magic. I talked about this earlier when I was talking about the Pokemon fanfiction I read. No, please don't go away. I promise this is related. But I can see a version of events where some group of people really do, for lack of anything else to give them direction, believe that maybe killing people once a year, every year, is the only way they can save some of the version of their town's prosperity. I don't think they're right, but I could absolutely believe that a group of people get desperate enough where that's what they take refuge in, because in some sick way that's something that they can control, right? They can't do much to control the inevitable encroachment of the outside world of modernization upon their small rural living space. They can, however, take some action to try to keep it at bay, especially if they think that there's some magical lineage that they're contacting that might help save them. I think if that is the case, that it is something that kind of it's the last throes of impotence in the face of the inevitable. If nothing you do can change what's going to happen, why not give the supernatural a shot, right? It's better than rolling over and just letting it happen. At least you can say you tried. Maybe that demands you do some horrible, horrifying things to your fellow citizens, but on the balance, that's better than letting the whole way of life collapse. I could absolutely see that being a version of events. And maybe that is part of the impetus behind the Watanagashi annual deaths. I still think that some of the I still have this inkling that the annual deaths were on some level opt-in. Maybe if they, maybe if some of the people over time came to regret it. Or maybe they just saw the accidental deaths of the Hojos in that first year and like, wait, we can reuse this. Maybe the Hojos were the accidental death and they're like, okay, we can work with this. I did say earlier I'd be willing to accept that no more than one of those annual deaths were a coincidence, right?
Did you?
Back in our chapter 1 discussion,
Okay.
I said I would be willing to accept that no more than one of those annual deaths were a coincidence.
Okay.
Because the foreman dies the way he's going to die. Events kind of happen there. Maybe the Hojos died on Watanagashi the year after, and they're like, we can use this. There's some momentum here. And then kind of conspired around that. But, yeah, I don't know. Did that answer your question? I kind of feel like I lost track again.
Yeah, the question was about the murder basement and what's up with that.
Right, and then I kind of talked about the murder basement and then went off on a tangent about the murder basement. Yeah, it seems pretty clear the murder basement exists, and while I think it was retrofitted, I don't think it was designed as a murder basement. I think it was retrofitted into murder basement. I definitely think that Shion in the final scene has a very vested interest in presenting it a specific way to Keiichi. Part of her really wants to tap into this historic lineage of purported serial deaths or purported demon ancestry, right? She really wants this to be part of that. But I think that might just be wishful thinking upon the part of the people who are using this place. I think it's also telling that it's pretty neat and clean when she gets down there. Even if you are someone using a murder basement, even if you do clean up well after yourselves, it's never going to be perfect. Like, you're not going to have a perfectly white tile drain, right? I think maybe
Put down a
there's
tarp.
Huh?
Put down a tarp.
In the drain that you made specifically in your murder basement. I think you could make I don't know that I buy it. I think you could make an argument the murder basement was never used for murder up until she other than
there's a body dump.
Other than dumping the bodies. I want to like I'm getting there. I'm saying like she hasn't used any of these torture devices to torture people. I'm not saying she hasn't hidden the bodies in the well. Like, obviously she has.
So to be clear, folks have still been murdered. They just haven't been murdered in this specific basement.
Right. I'm saying that they haven't been murdered in the murder basement. I'm not saying that I defend that position. I think there's a cogent argument to be made.
I was just going to say, it felt for like we were veering dangerously close to
the real benefit.
Sonozakis have done nothing wrong. And I was like, okay, but there's definitely a big pile of dead people in there.
What I would be contending is that the real benefit of the murder basement is a place to hide the bodies, not a place to do weirdly over-the-top ritualistic murder. I think if you're just trying to kill people, you have a vested interest to leave as little evidence as possible. And any kind of like hair, skin, blood that gets left over or whatever is potentially incriminating evidence down the line. Killing them as quickly and cleanly as you can and chucking them in the well, if you are trying to hide your tracks, is your best option. Right? And that seems to be one of the pragmatic goals of the annual murder group. Is that they don't want to be caught, and they're doing a very good job of that. They're doing a very good job of hiding the bodies, getting patsies, and making sure their names are not associated with it. Right? Which is also what differentiates them from Shion, who clearly wants someone to take the blame for it, or wants a name to be recognized as taking the blame for it. And doesn't really care about people making sure that people kind of live with it and accept it. She's really upended the town. Whereas like there's this kind of blithe acceptance around them of the annual merge where like we just don't talk about it. It's clear that like when they kept going on after that, the town kind of got kicked into high gear and started being like, okay, this is different. This feels different. We need to protect our children and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's also more evidence that it's a separate kind of thing going on, but whatever. So yeah. Murder basement. Probably a retrofitted government facility. Highly doubtful it was used for elaborate torture ceremonies, and more likely they just used it because there's a convenient pit to hide the bodies in out back. I think there's some benefit maybe to the spectacle of it, but I actually don't believe that it was used in that way.
Fair enough.
And I think part of the tying it into the history of this show of cannibalism, of demonhood, probably is more useful to them as a story than it is in actual practice. Because, well, you get blood everywhere. It's hard to clean up. Lots of incriminating evidence.
All right.
And it's interesting that they found whole bodies in the well. They didn't find like dismembered bits or pieces that were missing. They found whole bodies, which again suggests that they're just kind of killing them and not going about the process of like gruelly dismembering them and then eating them. You know what I mean? Because if that was the case, then all they would have found would have been like bones, stuff that's inedible. But no, they found bodies with clothing on in Rika's case. That speaks to a different ethos when it comes to killing them.
Fair enough.
Was that good? Did that answer your question, honey?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And a lot of other questions also.
Oh, it did? Oh, okay.
No, as in a lot of things that weren't the thing I asked too.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
People like
you have
it
a lot
when I
to
talk,
say.
though, right?
You have a lot to say.
This is people watch these episodes more than they do these episodes of the actual gameplay because they like hearing our theories. This is like the statistics bear this out.
One last thing on this bit. So how much do you think Shion knows then? It seems that you're under the impression the Sonozakis are involved in this stuff. Yep. Shion is.
It would be weird
not,
if they weren't.
Yeah. Shion is not and has this unrelated other motive that's crashing into it. Does she know what's up with this plot? Does she oppose it? Does she support it?
I think she might know what's up with it. It would be strange if she had no inkling of it. Especially since she seems to spend time with her family on the Watanagashi, right? She mentions seeing her dad for a little bit on the Watanagashi. Good for her. Dad's not around a lot, but he came back for the Watanagashi, maybe to murder people, who knows. Here's the thing. I think she knows about it because it would be hard for her not to.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think she's directly involved with it. And maybe she is resentful of that. Maybe
I wanted to turn on the murderers.
Maybe not. I wanted to turn with the murders. I wanted to turn with the responsibility. Remember, my theory is centered around the idea that she's jealous of Mion's life in like not just her friends, but like her responsibility and position of authority. So I think maybe Shion does have a sadistic side, as she hinted at. But I think it's more that it comes to her like she just wants to be would want to be in on the conspiracy, rather than she necessarily feels like, oh, I really have a hankering to murder people and I'll find any way to do it. So yeah, I think it would be weird if she wasn't aware of it on at least some level, because she still is like one of the Sonozaki sisters. And even if it is the ball is primarily in Mion's court, it would be weird if she heard none of that. It would be some impressive work-life separation on Mion's part. But I don't actually think she's necessarily involved with those. I do think she's aware, but I don't think she's necessarily involved.
All right.
And maybe feels resentful over that fact that her sister is and she isn't.
And that's about as much as I have about Shion. So let's talk about someone else.
Yo!
What the heck is up with Tomitake and Takano? We get more details, but it's just kind of dropped in here in this whole other wild narrative about Shmion's killing rampage and all of that wild stuff. So like, let's take a while to focus in on this side arc. What the heck is going on there?
I think it's clear that Shion sees the two of them, at least in some capacity, as allies. She is, for all her reservations, she is willing to go into that place with them and go that far with, and like talks to them on friendly terms and like we'll discuss the history of the murders there. I don't, which is also, again, I don't think Shion is the one that killed them. Or, I do think, that's unrelated, but I think there is perhaps some kinship there, and maybe Shion wanting to know more about what her family is into, and Mio having this very, like, intense desire to know the truth about Hinamizawa's history. I feel like Mio is coming at this from the position of someone who really wants those gory tales to be true. I think I've talked about this on like what I think her position is before, but I think she's someone who has enough remove that she would not want to forcibly insert herself into the narrative because that would, cheapen it, make it not real.
Mm-hmm.
But she also desperately, clearly wants this to be the case, that there's cannibal demon people who have been carrying on these rituals for centuries.
Mio is the audience insert derogatory.
Yes, absolutely. And I think she's definitely willing to go to some immoral lengths to do that. Like having Tomitake pick the lock on the shed just so she can get a look at some ritual implements that look like they haven't been used in forever, if at all, for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it's worth remembering that the stuff they find in the shed doesn't look like it's been used in a very long time, whatever its original purpose was for. But I also think that, like, her wanting it to be true necessarily precludes her from making it true herself. Because if she put her thumb on the scales, then it wouldn't mean that it's not real. I think she has this really strange sense of fair play about her where, like, she needs it to be real, but because she needs it to be real, she can't make it happen herself.
Mm-hmm.
She just has to desperately follow any lead that would help make it real. Or give her some reason for it to be real.
How does she then end up not dead in a barrel?
Not dead in a barrel. I wonder if some of that does come back to her having some inkling that, some awareness that her and Tomitake were the ones to die that night. It's interesting that it's not her in the barrel.
Yeah.
Or, because I've already talked about how this happens, right? Like, the body has dental records. The dental records don't match the dental records on file for Mio Takano. So that body then is, if it is the Mio Takano we've been following, then the Mio Takano we've been following fakes her dental records to be someone else's, which is weird for that purpose, if she was going to die anyway. Or that body is not Mio Takano's and she faked her dental records to be someone else's, and then their body was the one that was burned. Which seems to be the way that things have to have gone. I don't know what that says about her involvement, honestly, because it does kind of contradict the thing where I was saying, like, she couldn't put her thumb on the scale. This definitely seems like she was aware and took measures to make sure she would be declared dead, but could, not actually die herself.
One thing to note here before we get too far into it.
Yeah, please.
It wasn't that the body wasn't a dental record match. The body is a dental record match.
Right.
What we learned that made us suspect faked dental records was that this body was dead before
right
the time that we saw her up and walking around.
I think what I said then is backwards, but still the core of it is true, right? Her dental records were faked ahead of time in order to, and a body was prepared ahead of time for her to be dead.
Yeah. I think it does change things in a certain way, because it's weirder if you're faking your dental records and then you die and you're in the barrel and the dental records are fake somehow.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
This way I think there's a lot more parsimony in it.
You are absolutely
If that's
correct.
not Takano in there and someone faked the dental records to make people think it's Takano, that's pretty fucking weird. That makes a lot of something really intentional is happening.
You are absolutely correct. I had the wrong way about it. So yeah, I think that it's likely that it's likely that the Mio we see, or the person who's called Mio, who seems to be called Mio by pretty much everyone. The police officer talks to her as if she is Mio. She's clearly known as Mio by a larger number of people than I originally suspected might be the case. I thought it might be one of those cases where like she's only called Mio by like enough key people know her as Mio where that lie can kind of work, but that doesn't seem to be the case. But it's clear then that she did the work ahead of time to make sure her dental records matched the body that was going to be burned. Which she's a nurse. She's within the medical system. I don't have a problem believing that she could take the steps to make that happen. I'm not saying it's easy or trivial, but like I don't have a problem making that jump. That she made that happen. But it does kind of contradict my earlier thing about how like she wouldn't put her thumb on the scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that seems like very clearly her inserting herself into the narrative. Maybe I think she's got to have some other motivation behind all this. I don't know why she's so gung-ho on learning about all this, but it seems there is some driving factor behind her that we don't fully understand yet. And I wonder if it comes back to her notebook. Like, it's Mio's notebook, right? But is it her notebook that she's writing in, or is it someone else's notebook that she's been tracking down and corroborating stuff within? I'm kind of reaching at straws, but I feel like there is one key aspect of Mio's character we don't know yet. And I think it's too easy to just say she is dedicated to finding out the truth and connecting it to the history of this area to a disturbing degree. There has to be, I think there's one other aspect to that her motivations that we don't know.
Stepping back a bit, for her to fake her body, she'd need to know that she's going to die, right? In fact, how could she guarantee it's that particular body? What does that mean?
She'd have to kill him herself.
So
the unstated part of this is that Mio either straight up killed someone herself or is in cahoots with someone who did the killing with her.
Does that make her part of the Watanagashi murder plot?
Not necessarily. We know from the Watanagashi plots that it seems every year someone dies and someone goes missing, right? But I've also stated this beforehand that the someone goes missing part seems to be a lot less. They seem a lot less committed to that part than they do the someone dies part. And that maybe the someone goes missing part was kind of added on after the fact. Because I talked about this in some years with like Satoshi being the one that goes missing several days afterwards, and right, clearly they're not as committed to that part of the bit. It could be that the plan was only that Tomitake was going to die, but she also wanted to fake her death to add in that part of the narrative as well. Maybe I'm not certain. I really am not certain. I think it's interesting that her body is found in Chapter 2, but not Chapter 1. I don't know what that says about the operative differences between the two, given that the big difference between the two seems to be Shion's motivations, but I don't... Unless she's also, like, conspiring with Shion, which isn't out of the question, but it would be strange. I don't know how the body discovery goes differently, right? Because unless there's something else different going on, why would events play out differently?
Yeah.
So that is interesting to me. I don't know that I have good answers here, but I have a feeling we will get more about Mio later on that helps explain these parts. And like what I'm willing to concede that right now I have kind of a gap in my understanding of her and her motivations. I do think that's not her in the barrel. Or at least the person that we see breaking into the storeroom, talking with Keiichi and all that, the person we understand, the audience understand to be Mio Takano, that's not her in the barrel. And that because it's not her in the barrel, she willingly had to fake her dental records and potentially help murder someone. But I don't think we fully understand why yet.
All right. Any fresh thoughts this time around on Tomitake then?
I'm still kind of leaning back on what I had. I think it's likely Tomitake was among the original dam site conspirators that killed the foreman and turned into him being part of the pool of people who would die every Watanagashi. I still think that explanation. The sad thing is that nothing in this directly challenged that explanation of events because so much of what happened afterwards was just off the rails, right? Because Shion comes in and hijacks that plot with a sledgehammer. So I didn't really have a chance to interrogate whether or not my understanding of how the Watanagashi murders happened historically and how they would happen in the future. I didn't have a chance to interrogate whether or not that was actually true, which is because nothing directly contradicted it and nothing really backed it up either. It was just kind of carbon neutral. So I don't know. It's not really satisfying to say that. Maybe there are details I missed that explicitly deconfirm it, but I still think it's likely that he was part of the original dam site conspirators that killed the foreman and is now knows that he's among the people who will die in Watanagashi's going forward. So,
all right. And one last thing in this area. So we now think that Takano's got some sort of plot going on, but it seems we kind of have a multi scheme pileup by now, don't we? Where we have this whole Watanagashi murders thing that we're uncovering, but then we have Shion's whole murder plot, but then we have Rena's murder plot on your theory, and now we have Takano's murder plot, and by now we're in this situation where effectively every character in the story is
I wouldn't go that far, but you're right. But I also think that it's that's the best explanation for events. Because I think when we try to explain events like Keiichi, but with one active force behind everything, we wind up having to fall back on mythological explanations for things. Whereas if we understand that people in their relationships are complicated and messy and could be working in different areas, cross purposes to one another at different times, we have a much more thorough understanding of why certain characters act certain ways in certain situations. I think it's much more realistic to think of there being a couple of different plots that are conspiracy that have kind of like collided with one another than there is that there's just one overarching thing that explains everything. Because I don't think that can happen with how many disparate and contradictory things we've seen.
All right.
Science juice.
Then we've got one more character that we haven't talked much about.
Is it Satoko? I hope it's
Satoko.
Yes!
So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about Satoko this time. You mentioned that it seemed like she was kind of a side character this time, mostly just caught astray in your words.
Yep.
So I'm curious if you have anything else that you want to talk about Satoko this chapter.
I have a feeling Satoko is going to be another one of those characters where she has a lot of characters on the periphery of her life that feel like they're going to get the limelight later on when the story kind of turns to them. I don't feel like we get to the end of the story without seeing Satoko's uncle, without getting some closure on Satoshi, without... I feel like that they're... Whoops. It could be the case that she is truly the one in all this that is just kind of the innocent bystander. But I believe she also has... I believe she's got more to tell that will be happening in the future. I think because of events, we haven't had a chance to really go meet her uncle or anything like that. But I think in a world where, say, Rika dies very early on, suddenly someone has to take care of Satoko. Right? And that maybe there's a world where we learn more about her living family and how they relate to the events that happened before. But that's just kind of speculation. It really like I don't want to just categorically say she's uninvolved in all this stuff, but I feel like categorically she's not involved in any of the stuff we've seen so far. She really just seems to be the victim of terrible circumstance time and time again, who is just doing her best to keep on, and we should support her in that. And we should let her have one free kill.
Now,
I am 100% behind this. Whoever she wants, guilt-free.
now we did have though one kind of big thing about Satoko that happened in this chapter that was kind of weird and just went right past it onto other stuff. I wonder if you remember what it was.
One big thing about Satoko that was kind of weird that then got swept under the rug, the part where she can't cook, or the part where Rena's theory relies on her being able to cook.
Nope.
I got my eye on you, Rena.
Something that was very explicit. Something that was not just one of our ideas about
fighting Rena in the homeroom, her going after Rika. I'm trying to think about what other things came up with Satoko. It's been a little while, so I might just...
She wasn't there for it. She vanished already by the time of the event I'm thinking of.
By the time of the event that you're thinking of.
Do you remember Mion's Satoko rants?
Mion's Satoko rant? How she deserve... Oh, right, when she's outside holding the ladder?
Yeah, and is like...
Talking about how she's a demon child?
Absolutely losing it while Keiichi's up on the ladder, holding on for dear life, trying not to fall off. And the moment folks show up again, suddenly it's all cool and normal. What's up with that? Is Satoko really not involved? It'd be kind of weird.
Here's the thing. We on my theory, that's Shion holding the ladder there, right?
She just have a thing against Satoko?
I wonder if Shion holds something against Satoko. About how she's a demon child where everything bad happens around her and stuff and all that, right? She's clearly got some anger towards Satoko in particular. I'm trying to... Of all the events that might be directed towards, maybe that's directed towards the initial part where Satoko's parents die. Maybe that truly was an accident, and she thinks Satoko's responsible, but because of that accident, they felt obligated to continue on the Watanagashi deaths every year, or maybe that's where they got the idea to do the Watanagashi deaths every year. And then she's resentful of Satoko for being in some way the genesis of that plan. Other than that, I don't fucking know. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I do think whatever Shion's got against her, Satoko really is just got the short end of the stick. What would Satoko have that Shion doesn't have? Satoko is a friend to Mion.
Complex PTSD.
Satoko is a friend to Keiichi. Satoko is a friend to Rika. She's got their ear all the time. Satoko is happy. Shion doesn't seem happy. I know that's a kind of a big swing to take, but Shion just comes across as very insecure, right? She needs to make sure that Keiichi loves her and not think that she's her sister when he says that. She wants more power than she has, and her sister has it. Whereas Satoko, from everything we've seen about her, seems remarkably well adjusted for someone who's had shit served on a silver platter.
Yeah.
She, with the most times we've seen her in a bad mood are when Keiichi is feeling bad. And when one of her friends close to her isn't feeling good, we see her feeling bad, and it's more from an empathetic side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's part of it. I really am struggling to figure out what other connection between the two of them have there, because you're right, it's kind of out of left fucking field, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I feel like my only explanations are she blames Satoko in some way for being the genesis of these murders, or she's resentful of the fact that Satoko can be happy and she can't.
Fair enough.
Maybe she thinks that Satoko should or deserves to be unhappy and miserable, and is resentful of the fact that Satoko can still find happiness and joy in her friends around her. I don't know. I really am kind of shooting in the dark. I didn't really have anything in mind that would explain that, but I also feel like, unless I've missed a really important detail, which I'm not discounting, the game really hasn't given us a whole lot to chew on in that sense. We very rarely get explicit interactions between Satoko and Shion. Maybe in the cafe during that one scene, right? And then some of their interactions after Shion takes over Mion's life, but not a whole lot to really give me any idea of what would cause her to have that resentment. Unlike with Mion, where we can make a pretty solid guess, I feel. This one, I feel like we're missing some context. We're missing some background on Satoko that might help elucidate things.
All right.
Maybe Shion loves Satoshi?
Interesting
Maybe Shion
theory.
loves Satoshi and she resents Satoko because Satoko's the reason Satoshi left? I don't know.
Okay, but then if we revive Trans-Rena theory...
If we revive Trans-Rena theory... Oh, then she's resentful that Satoshi is a girl now? I don't know, but this is spicy.
Or
This
perfect
is
accomplice.
spicy. Perfect accomplice. Oh, but then why would she be resentful of Satoko for that? There's some spicy stuff here. But yeah, I feel like I genuinely just don't have enough to really give a good cogent answer here.
That's fine.
I hope that's not a letdown. I hope I at least explained some of my thoughts and reasons why I couldn't and like where my gaps were, but hopefully that's still good.
All right.
Am I doing good? Do people enjoy this? Do you enjoy this? Leave a comment if you enjoy this.
I think you're doing good.
Oh, thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Aw, thanks, Viv.
Do your best. Keep fighting. Yay. So, I've got one final question for you here. So,
science juice. What's up?
There's something that's pretty different about how we approached Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, where a lot of Chapter 1, we were talking about what is and isn't actually real. It sure seemed like a lot of events that we were shown didn't happen.
Yep.
And that hasn't been part of your explanations so far for Chapter 2. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think that's still in play here? Do you think there's maybe it was in play in Chapter 1 and isn't in Chapter 2 for some reason? Do you think it was never in play in Chapter 1 and it was a red herring?
I'm of two minds about this. In some ways, I feel like Chapter 2 has given us more explanations that for scenes of Chapter 1 that I thought for sure were fake. That like, oh no, maybe there was actually a syringe there. Maybe it wasn't a marker. And I'm like, the fuck? Really? There is a syringe? Okay, I guess. So maybe in some cases I was too hasty to jump on that. But also, Keiichi is acting markedly differently. And whether you want to chalk that up to him being a little bit more sociable and around his friends, and not isolating himself, or Shion getting hit with the hallucination drug and not him, right? It does seem like there's something markedly different, because Keiichi is no longer narrating strange events as if they are actually happening to him. He's kind of entirely like speculating on why those might be happening. He's not talking about like feeling presences up behind him and all that. He's talking about how like, oh, this must be Oshiro-sama because it's the only explanation for what I have. There was discussion of a drug that would heighten senses, right? Something maybe that like, wouldn't cause you to necessarily hallucinate, but would amplify things you already hear and feel. Maybe that's the explanation for why Shion hears a thing that no one else does and why she feels on edge during that evening. Maybe that's the explanation for why Keiichi feels presences behind him. Maybe it's just him feeling into crawling on his back and having that sensation heightened, right? So maybe it's a drug, or maybe it is just Keiichi being in a better environment. I would have said Keiichi being in a better environment if not for Shion's reactions during the evening of the Watanagashi, where it does seem like she's hearing something they don't, and I don't know that it's something that can be explained solely by spatioacoustic properties. So maybe there is a drug that makes you more susceptible to... But even then, it's worth pointing out that unlike Keiichi, she doesn't like fully unravel. At least at that moment.
Yep.
Keiichi, very clearly, when he's got the hallucination ball, seems to unravel pretty darn quickly. Isolating himself from his friends, imagining people behind him and watching him on every corner and whatnot. And it's very drastic. Whereas Shion, if that is indeed her in that same position that he was, still seems remarkably put together.
But have you considered this theory that Shion's hearing things nobody else is because Rika's hiding outside with one of those directional sound beam devices.
Oh, there we go. I like this. That's what the ceremonial hoe is. Because Keiichi forgot to turn on his hearing aid.
Yeah, could be.
Well, no, because he was listening to Mio tell a story and he couldn't read lips because it was too dark. So, unfortunately, we have to categorically rule that one out. Maybe Keiichi's deaf in one ear. Yeah. So, if not for the fact that Shion does seem to exhibit some of those similar symptoms that Keiichi did in chapter 1, I would have said it's just a difference in Keiichi's environment and he is in a more healthy place, right? And I still think some of that analysis stays to a degree. Like, Keiichi clearly still has this capacity in him to withdraw and become very miserable without his friends around.
Yep.
But I no longer believe that alone is necessarily a satisfying explanation. I think I need another data point on this.
Mm-hmm.
If we see someone else get the hallucination ball in chapter 3, then I think we can say something like, okay, then I think we can start guessing like, okay, this is a drug that someone gets for whatever reason. Or if we see another situation where Keiichi would have relapsed in circumstances like chapter 1 but doesn't in chapter 3, then maybe we can say like, okay, maybe this understanding is incomplete. I think right now I'm at the point where like what we've seen in chapter 2 so thoroughly goes against what my assumption was in chapter 1 that I just need another data point.
Yep.
Right. Which I don't like admitting, but I'm willing to admit that like my analysis looks like it was premature. I can admit when I'm wrong sometimes. Unlike with trans Rena theory.
Which will always be correct.
Which will always be correct if only in my heart.
Before that turns out to be a thing but irrelevant to the plot. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be so fucking awesome, actually. I would love that. Nothing more than to be right about that. Yeah. So I guess that's another thing we're going to be looking at chapter 3 going forward is like, how does Keiichi's mood relate to... But here's the other thing is that he is very much in that hallucinatory space for a very long time in chapter 1. It's not just one day he's feeling awful and then, next day he's kind of back to normal. It's something that keeps going and compounds on itself, which makes it seem very unlikely that it's a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is a drug, who is the only person that could do it to him? His parents.
Maybe it's a really long-lasting drug.
There's
stuff that screws you up for a couple days.
A couple days, sure, but weeks? It is long enough that it would strain credulity for it to be a single thing. It would have to be if it was the case that it's a hallucinogen is the explanation for Keiichi's feelings in chapter 1. Then we also have to explain who was doing it and when, because they have to be re-upping him. Right? Even if you want to believe it could go for a few days at once, he has to be coming into contact with that person again and getting re-upped. Maybe it's Rena putting it in the food. There we go. Found it. Okay, awesome. That's why she needed to make him dinner that one time. And that's why she needed him to eat those food she made for him. Rena is baking hallucinogens.
Rena's been making him magic cookies all these times, and he's never thought to think about what makes them magic, but he usually feels pretty good after having them. But lately, events have been different, and set and setting is everything.
Right.
And suddenly this magic is a lot less magic.
It's a lot like that one Buffy episode where the guy puts ecstasy in all his cookies to get people to like him. Spoilers for that one Buffy episode. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. It's like I've got the two different explanations now, and we're gonna want another data point to kind of clarify that. And if it does wind up being he is feeling these things because of hallucinogen or some other drug that's heightening his senses, right? Then we have to know who is doing it and why, and then also crucially when. It's not just the who and why, we also need to know the when, because there is a practical multi-day, there is a practical difficulty to doing this to someone, right? You have to be able to make sure that you're getting it into their system without them being aware of it. So that really does, there really is a practical angle that needs to be overcome by that explanation. Which again, easily done by Rena's food. Rena's been feeding Keiichi the happy leaves. I'm not much of a druggie. I try. Like, I had a phase in college where kind of like I felt obligated to try to get into marijuana, and it just made me hungry. It wasn't really that interesting otherwise. Then again, I did admittedly like mention that I was drinking some bourbon in my coffee at the beginning of this, so you know.
I do find it really funny how much you like stoner metal for a person who never, ever, ever consumes the substance that the genre is about.
I mean, to be fair, do you think all stoner metal bands do? It's just a good genre of music. It's a good combination of drone and doom metal, and sounds really, really enjoyable in movie. You don't have to be into marijuana to enjoy the sound or want to perform stoner metal. It's just, that's the name of the genre.
I would, however, be willing to put my money on any individual stoner metal band, indeed being stoners.
I would say, I would feel comfortable saying most. I don't feel bad about that, but like I'm just saying it's not categorically the case. Yeah, for someone who's as into much post metal as you are, you don't seem very post.
Okay, you take that back. I love the institution of the United States Postal Service.
Okay, that's fair.
I think
No, that's
that
postal metal. That's different.
Fair enough.
That's different. Got any more questions for me?
I don't.
What? We're done?
We have gone through all of the questions that I thought I was going to ask and more.
Oh, wow.
So
there's nothing else you want to ask me about that chapter? Okay.
Are there if there are things remaining that you wanted to talk about that you're actually no, you're right. There is one final question that I forgot to ask.
Okay, yeah.
And that question is this. I forgot to write it down, is why I forgot to ask it. But it is,
fair.
Are you surprised by any of the things I didn't ask you about? And if so, what are those things?
Are you surprised by any of the things you didn't?
Yeah.
Is this a clever way to get me to do the rest of your job for you? Wow. Okay. Interesting. Am I surprised you didn't ask me about anything? Yeah. Surprised you didn't ask me more about the community of Hinamizawa. But then again, I guess I did willingly talk a lot about that myself, right?
Yeah, I would have asked a lot about that if it weren't for the fact that between your own summary and the stuff you got into when talking about other folks' questions about the themes and the historical context and so on, I feel like you kind of got your explanation of that stuff on lock.
I'm surprised you didn't ask me about the unknown bodies at the bottom of the well.
That's a good point, actually. Who are those people? Who's in there?
People who died and went missing previously. It's the murder hole from the Yakuza. Like, you don't need a whole imagination. The thing is, like, I don't think it super matters.
Fair.
I don't think it really matters. Either it is where the people who went missing in previous Watanagashi deaths are, or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's unrelated mob killings.
Yeah, I feel like
it doesn't change.
I think we explicitly got that it was not those people.
Did we? I thought it just said a bunch of unknown bodies that still had to go further testing.
Oh, okay.
I thought they had left it up in the air, not that they had explicitly confirmed either way.
Fair enough.
You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure at the end of the chapter what they came down to is we don't know yet, but we will. Which got derailed by Oishi bringing Keiichi porn. I'm surprised you didn't ask more about Oishi's relation to certain characters. Why he seems really invested in Keiichi in chapter 1.
That's a good point. I thought of asking about this, and I kind of wrote it off because I figured we were getting into it in other questions, but we didn't. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's another difference in between chapter 1 and chapter 2.
It's who he suspects.
Yeah, he seems to be suspecting Rena in chapter 1. He seems to be suspecting Shion in chapter 2. But he's got like a whole sting operation plan
ready
this
to
time.
Go specifically on the Sonozakis.
Yeah, and one that it seems like that's not like an overnight thing. So what's What's happened?
I think Keiichi for Oishi is at best a useful idiot. He is a pawn that can be moved. And Oishi will find whatever words or suspicion he needs to implant in Keiichi to make him do what he needs to do. Whether it's willingly putting himself at risk to try to draw someone out. Actually, that's what he does both times, isn't it?
Yep. That's pretty much what Keiichis are good for.
That's pretty much Oishi's plan of attack.
Let's take this teenage boy and put him in front of the murderers.
There's no consistency really in who he suspects, but I think that says more about Oishi's lack of scruples, or I mean, not that, but how that's not really related to what his true goal is. I think his true goal really is to reveal the Sonozakis as a criminal organization. And I think he genuinely does expect to find guns, poppy farms, all that stuff. He expects to uncover a drug ring. And he has built up his men like he is preparing for that to be what they reveal. There is almost like a disappointment in him after the fact when it's like, this is not at all what I was expecting to I think he's genuinely taken off guard by what he finds down there. I think he's got an idea and an agenda of what he wants to uncover. And the reality is that while the Sonozakis sure as hell have some shit going on, they aren't, at least the branch in Hinamizawa, aren't running drugs. At least they aren't running drugs out of that bunker on their compound. So, and I don't know that he's ready to accept that could be an answer. That's why I think Oishi is kind of like, not flighty, but very willy-nilly about what he's willing to tell Keiichi. Because he doesn't fucking care what Keiichi thinks about him. He doesn't care if what he tells Keiichi is true or not. He just needs Keiichi to do certain things for him to get him the results he needs. And in Chapter 1, that means he needs Keiichi suspicious of Rena. And in Chapter 2, that means he needs Keiichi suspicious of Mion. That's really what it boils down to.
What causes his suspicion to change, do you think?
I don't think his suspicion actually changes. I just think that's what he tells Keiichi. I don't know that he even is genuinely suspicious of either of them more than the other in those chapters. What I'm saying is that that's what he tells Keiichi because that's what will motivate Keiichi to do what he needs him to do. Clearly, he does have some baseline suspicion of the people around Mion and the Sonozaki kids because he's done background research on them. Mm-hmm. He's done that research on Rena, but he doesn't share it in Chapter 2 because Rena's working with him. Why share that? Why share that stuff when Rena's going along with his plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is to say, I don't think he's actually suspicious of Rena in Chapter 1. I think Keiichi thinking that he is suspicious of Rena is what he needs to motivate Keiichi to do what he needs to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Oishi's suspicion is genuine in that sense. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that he hasn't done like some research on them, background checks on them, or isn't suspicious of them in the capacity that they are friends of the Sonozakis. But I do think he plays up particular suspicions to get Keiichi to act the way he wants him to.
Fair enough.
Other things I'm surprised you didn't ask me about. I'm surprised you didn't ask me more like moral questions about what I think about the Sonozakis now that we know more about how they operate and work. Like, are the Sonozakis a good force for Hinamizawa and Okonomiya, or are they... Okonomiya? Is that the name of the city?
Yeah, Okonomiya City, I believe.
City, right. Are they like a net positive? Are they a good force for the area, or are they, a villainous force to be rooted out like Oishi wants? Surprised you didn't ask me that. I'm not going to answer it. I'm just surprised you didn't ask it. Surprised you didn't ask me more about Angel Mort, honestly. Get Keiichi in the Angel Mort uniform. You know what? Okay, hold on here. Sidebar. I was not wrong to pick up with the themes of gender and identity in the first half of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
The identity part of it clearly carried through, but the gender part just kind of got tossed halfway partway through. What the hell was up with that? It was shaping up to be the gender chapter. And then it just kind of like, fuck it.
And then here's Shion with the steel chair.
Shion comes in with a steel chair. That's exactly what it is.
What if that's it? What if that's the actual plot that's supposed to be happening is about coming to terms with gender identity, but people keep on getting the murders all over the place in the meanwhile.
Here's the thing, I would believe that. I absolutely would believe that. If there's an author who would do that, it would be R07. I believe that. That is absolutely a plausible version of this story that I'm holding in my mind. The version where we're getting at a chapter where Keiichi, because events conspire to make him do so, has to cross-dress and pass as female for the entire chapter. But it's not his fault. He's not asking to do it. He has to. It's not his fault. It's not like he wants to or anything. He just has to, and maybe that in doing so, he learns something about himself. Yes, I am just quoting every single Force Femme thing you've ever read before, and no, I don't care. Oh, the satisfying tinkling sound of my wife dropping our wedding ring.
I have to fidget.
I keep telling you, we need to get you a fidget spinner.
We have to get me a fidget toy.
All right. Like a quiet one, though, right?
Yeah, it has to be quiet enough for me to fidget with while we record.
I'm sure there's something that'll fit that bill. If you know a good quiet fidget toy, put it in the comment section.
Absolutely. I will buy it.
Unironically.
I will buy it. We will do a review video once I've tried a couple.
I wasn't ready to go that far, but okay. Vivian says we will do a review video of it as well. So, wow. Okay. Writing checks that I hope Future Us can cash.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I kind of did this one on my own, but I'm surprised you didn't ask me more about like who we're going to see more of in future chapters.
Yeah.
Like, I kept talking about like how it feels like we keep learning about characters on the periphery, and then like the story kind of shifts focus to a different slate. Right?
Yep.
So I imagine like Satoko's family is going to, her uncle is going to be in focus for one of them. The Kimiyoshi's daughter is going to be, she's going to be a character at some point, I'm sure.
Did you notice I was deleting questions as we went?
I didn't, but that's funny as hell. That's really funny. Oh man, how many of them did I snipe from you?
Some.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a very bad interviewee.
There is nothing to be sorry about. You got into it in the context of the other questions that other folks asked, and there's no need for me to ask it twice if it's already been answered.
Well, hear me out. This one's a little shorter than it was in Chapter 1, but I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 had a lot of ground to cover, like a lot of groundwork to cover, right? And I think now that we're kind of in the midst of it, and I'm getting and I'm getting more things as we go along, that these aren't going to be much shorter, but like it'll probably be easier for us to be like, okay, we covered this stuff. This is good. Higurashi Chapter 3 will be starting soonish. Whenever we finish Spare Parts, we'll probably move right on to Higurashi Chapter 3.
Expect that to get recorded in like a single weekend, and then
it'll be one single manic weekend of recording. And I mean, as soon as we get to it, we are not going to stop recording it. I hope you've been enjoying the other series that we've been doing in the meantime. I know some of you are just here for the Higurashi, and that's fine. I appreciate you coming here nonetheless. But for those of you who've also been watching the other stuff, I hope you've been enjoying it. Like the game we played where Mion Sonozaki sells you a ritual implement out of her underground bunker. If you know, you know. I don't think I'm wrong about that. I think
the color scheme was too specific for all those characters.
Right? It has to be. God.
Smash that like, comment and subscribe.
Hey, this is Eskay in editing here. If you're hearing this, we're about to hit the Umineko spoiler section of the video. So if you're watching this on the playlist, or if you haven't played Umineko at all yet and you want to skip ahead to the next video, this is your opportunity to do that. There will be full game Umineko spoilers past this point. Right, so framing device. Knowing what I do from Umineko. In Umineko, the framing device is these are written mysteries from Sayo and then forgeries iterating on those characters and themes. Right? Here in Higurashi, one of the that was something that had occurred to me earlier on when we started, as soon as we got an author character involved, right? But if we think of these as written accounts, who is writing? Then we'd have to ask who is writing them and why. One of my ideas for that might be that, hey, maybe this is somewhat like, we don't know what the future looks like just yet, but it could be the case that maybe this is maybe Shion, for example, writing these in the future, wishing that she had been able to get in more on her sister's group of friends during that one summer. Kind of the last summer before things went their other way. I am less certain than before that's the case now. And here's the big thing that makes me convinced that we're not looking at written accounts. The fact that the end of chapter 2 takes place so much further in the future than the rest of than chapter 1 did. We see Keiichi in the hospital weeks later now.
Yeah.
Like a good amount of time has passed. Before and like just speaking like in terms of time that's like wildly different. And Keiichi doesn't die in this one, right? Like that's also important.
Although
he has a bit of a psychotic break. Let the man be.
I don't know, that or Zombie Mio just gets him.
Zombie Mio gets him, could be. Or it could be 3-own.
Could be.
It could be 3-own. Hear me out.
Okay, but what if Zombie Tag was just cluing us in that zombies are real?
Exactly. Here's my new theory. Zombies are real, and zombies can convincingly take on the appearance of living people.
Yeah. That solves a lot of problems.
That solves a lot of problems. No, my real answer to that is well, we'll talk about that at a different time. I because this is still in the Umineko spoilers section. So yeah, given what I know about the framing device in Umineko, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's, despite the fact that I know that that's on the table, I don't actually think that's what's happening here.
Okay.
I don't believe that this is a similar case to Umineko.
Okay.
So what's up with Rika? Umineko spoilers version.
Yep.
I think it's particularly fascinating that Ikuko chose to name a cat after her.
Yeah,
Yeah. And given what we know about Ikuko, I think that means that Rika Furude might have been either a murder victim or someone who was tightly related to a bunch of murders in the past. Because she's got her eye on like the history of true crime and all that. So it would be very tongue-in-cheek for her to name her cat after a character in a large-scale unresolved incident. Which we've
even seen Cat Rika now, right?
Yes, we have seen Cat Rika now. Which, bringing that back, means that the Rika in this story is probably going to wind up being the central figure. And I don't know if that means she dies under mysterious circumstances or if she's the one who lives. But either way, it's going to turn out that she's the one of very much outsized importance in this story, I think.
I see.
Knowing that Ikuko bothers to name her cat after her tells me that, like, in her history, the events in Hinamizawa have achieved such importance that she can be like, look, I named my cat after a real person who had tragic things happen to them in real life. Isn't that so edgy of me?
And the cat's not named Keiichi, which I guess must mean that Keiichi doesn't matter at all. He just happens to be our viewpoint character, huh?
The point. That's exactly the point, is that it's not, her cat isn't named Keiichi. So Keiichi is less important to this than Rika is. Rika is much more important to this story than Keiichi is, which is fucking hilarious to me. But also kind of true. From what we know about Keiichi, he's mostly got bystander stuff going on.
Yep.
Like, we know that he's like the trigger for what makes Shion go all full Parent Trap, but he's not the one that makes that happen. He's not the active player making that stuff happen.
He's just the guy that stumbles in and steps on the hornet nest. And I guess both times he's stepped on different hornet nests and different bad things have happened.
That's exactly it. Keiichi is the bystander that can't stop stepping on all of these bees. Look at all of these bees and all of these places for me to be stepping. Anyway.
The Umineko containment zone has been entered.
All right, welcome to the Umineko containment zone. So in Umineko, when they cry specifically, scenes can be not literally true, but have thematic truth to them in the sense that, in a couple of different senses. In the sense that, like, someone is privately experiencing this series of events, or this is the agreed upon version of events by a group of conspirators shown after the fact, right?
Mm-hmm.
If everybody in a room agrees that this is what happened, then who is anyone to tell them otherwise, right? There's this sense that, like, even if the narrative is false, it's either the prevalent story with no one else to question it, or it's like someone's private truth. In the sense that, like, Natsuhi speaking with Beatrice is her private truth, right? That like Natsuhi speaking with Beatrice in the garden is her private truth. Even if Erika doesn't really want to let that happen. But that's a whole different can of kettles. I like that. I didn't mean to say that.
That was a good one.
I didn't mean to say that, but now that I've said it, yes, I'm going with
Lean
this
in
one.
on that. That's a good Eskayism.
That's a good Eskayism. A whole different can of kettles. However, I think that's fundamentally different from what's happening with Higurashi. And the big reason for that is we always have the same viewpoint character. Excepting small instances in, like, the tips section, right? Where those can be whatever. I don't recall instances in the main narrative. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but even if I'm wrong, I'm going to say 95% of the main narrative is Keiichi's point of view.
Yeah.
Umineko switches around points of view so dramatically that you can have, like, 3 different points of view within, like, a handful of sentences, right? It's one could argue that's one of its failings in, like, its ability to communicate who is speaking when, but also that's part of the puzzle, figuring out who's speaking when and what their agenda is, right, all that. Higurashi, by and large, does not do that. There are selected scenes where we step out of Keiichi's point of view, and those are important to keep in mind. But 95% of the time, it is Keiichi's point of view. Which means that fundamentally the question we're asking is different. It's not asking, like, what rule can we find by which we've just derived the truth of these scenes. The rule is, how do we interpret what Keiichi Maibara is narrating? It's less about, like, finding some universal truth within what he's narrating, and more, what does it mean that Keiichi Maibara is narrating this stuff?
Yep.
Even if I've come around and being like, did they really fake us out with, like, the double fake stuff in chapter 1? Even if that's the case, which I'm not totally buying it, but even if it is, the question is, like, specifically for Keiichi Maibara, why would he be narrating it this way? And there's a couple of good answers for that, I think. One of those answers is he is being willfully ignorant. We've seen this a couple of times, and, like, he will talk about how his brain hasn't fully registered what he's seeing, or he's stopping himself from fully recognizing what's going on in front of him, and thus his narration is kind of extrapolating from, like, incomplete data, right? It's either, and I've characterized this often as him taking the worst possible turn of events and turning them as truth, and running with them as truth, as often is the case. I will defend. So oftentimes what that amounts to is that maybe if the narration is not literally true, but we can take it as what Keiichi fears is the truth behind the events. Or what he, in his constant seeking of the worst case scenario, would be happening in that moment. So when, like, it can manifest in subtler ways, like him being like, "Oh, this is Mion," or like in him just accepting that it's Mion speaking to him during that final scene. Even when a more credulous person might pick up on some details and be like, wait, hold on, and stuff like that. There's also the case, him being willfully ignorant, and him just straight up not having context for some things. And when he's just straight up doesn't have context for something, he's going to try to fit it to what he knows, whether or not that's the case. And we can see that in his framing of the murders in chapter 2. On my theory, there are two different distinct plots going on that both have murders around the same time. There is the Watanagashi annual murders, and then there is Shion's plot to take over her sister's life.
Mm-hmm.
Keiichi doesn't have that context, so he's going to see the two of them colliding, and his narration is going to reflect them being one unified conspiracy. And that's the best explanation he can come up for, is that, oh, them breaking into the storehouse must have been the reason. Because and the narration will run with that, because that's the best that Keiichi has with the information he has on the table, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's not wrong. It's just he's deriving a bit more than he can safely do so with the information he has. I don't think there's been an instance so far of Keiichi fabricating a series of events wholesale.
Really?
In the same way that, like, in Umineko, when people can agree that, like, okay, this is what happened in this room, we all agree that this is a story, therefore the narration can present it that way as fact.
Okay, so you mean specifically that he is not willfully lying to present a thing to be a different way than it is.
I don't believe
that. Fabricated can mean a lot of different things.
That is correct. I don't think there's anything happening in the same way that in Umineko, where this is either a lie we've all agreed upon, and because no one can challenge it, this becomes the accepted truth. Or I don't believe that there are any, at least yet to my knowledge, I don't think there have been any scenes that have been like, this reflects an internal truth for Keiichi that is not necessarily literally true. I am aware from Umineko that these are tools in the toolbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect them to apply in this sort of way, because I think more of what Higurashi is getting at is less finding I think Higurashi, at least from what I've seen so far, the game seems less interested in trying to pick out what does it mean for this person to portray this thing this way, and more what does it mean for Keiichi Maibara to present something in a different way. I think the existence of a single universal narrator is very important. And in that sense, I don't think we've really seen anything that's... I don't think we've seen anything that doesn't correlate to reality, like, in a majority way. I don't think there's anything where Keiichi's making up people to talk to, except maybe accepting when he's under a lot of psychological duress. Maybe, like, I don't think Mion is literally there in his hospital room clutching.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that there are some things that
I think we can take that scene to be like Keiichi being like feeling some kind of regret or remorse over how events turned out. Because at that point, he still blames himself for how he treated Mion. Like, that's what he believes is at the center of those events, is how he treated Mion. So, of course, his insecurities are going to show to themselves as Mion, right? But I think it's also important that those scenes are fewer and further between than they are in Umineko. In Umineko, especially, we get scenes with characters who are the same person talking to themselves with very little indication that something is up, right? And it takes a lot of more work to parse out, like, who is actually who here. There is some of that in Higurashi, like parsing out who is Shion and who is Mion. But I don't expect that it's going to take that same path, if only because I don't think RO7 repeats those kinds of major tricks, like, wholesale. Until
he hits you with the surprise uppercut of, there is no Shion.
Oh, shit!
What if he did, though?
Oh, that would be so stupid. I don't believe that, just so we're clear. But that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel like if there is some instances where what we're seeing is not the literal truth, but a thematic truth, it's going to be in instances specifically where Keiichi's under a lot of psychological duress. Like we see at the end of chapter 2. I do not believe that there is a zombie Mion under his bed. Maybe it's Rena come to finish the job. Who knows? But I do think that is a representation of a very stressed and tired Keiichi's insecurities manifesting to him as what he believes to be the catalyst for all of these events. I think he is wrong, and I think because he is wrong, we can tell that that is something that comes directly from him and not in actuality. But I think those cases are very small and isolated. I think when they do happen, what we're able to glimpse is what Keiichi fears. Kind of how he is recognizing, how he is internalizing the situation around him, right? Which is to say that's not necessarily what's literally happening, but we can get some insight into how Keiichi feels about things, as if we needed more. Right? We're already pretty much riding shotgun, and him blaming his interaction with Mion is not exactly revolutionary when he says as much several times. But I don't know, maybe I'm just not credulous enough. I feel like I'm pretty credulous, but maybe I'm not credulous enough. I feel like the things that Higurashi is trying to do with its characters and its scene are fundamentally different from how Umineko works. Right? And in so much as I don't think Higurashi yet is really trying to play those games with us.
Okay.
Where it's like inventing stuff wholesale and showing it to us and being like, oh, isn't this mysterious? Where the answer is that just didn't happen. Of course, you know, I might not be speaking with love here, but you know what I mean. Magic is real. I want to be clear. Magic is real.
Maybe I should be doing it in this voice.
Wait, no, that's Satoko voice for this playthrough, not Erika voice. Shit.
Chopsticks.
Does that answer the question? I feel like I answered it somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll take that. I feel like Umineko would have been more difficult if I came from Higurashi first. Because Higurashi does set up some expectations for how like repeated narratives on a theme works that Umineko completely blows out of the water, I feel like if anything else, Umineko has over-prepared me to be credulous of the narrative. To the part where, like, I might have been too credulous of the fact that Keiichi was being attacked with a needle in Chapter 1. That seems more likely that was literally just happening.
Wait, doesn't credulous mean to believing in a thing?
I thought credulity is am I wrong about that?
Credulous is having or showing too great a readiness to believe things.
Oh, okay. Umineko may have instilled in me too great incredulity.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So I you know what? Now that I've said that makes perfect sense that works that way. Okay.
And luckily, it's not one of those ones like flammable and inflammable.
Right, where it's the same word, which fucking infuriates me. Or one now. That's not important. I don't need to talk about that right now. Either way, expectations. I feel like so far, Higurashi doesn't have anything in the When They Cry series that came before. I don't know about RO7's other works. I don't know. Is this RO7's first work?
I don't know.
So
I feel like it isn't, but I'm going to Google that real quick.
I don't know how it relates in relation to RO7's other works, but it is the first in the When They Cry series, and in that sense, it is free from the fetters of expectation for what a series should be. I feel like in some ways Umineko is a response to that, right? In like, what other ways can we present a serial, repetitive narrative in a way that subverts, in a way that's familiar to what we've done before, but still subverts it, right?
Higurashi was his first.
Yeah.
He did other stuff previously, but this was the first, like, video game thing, at least according to Wikipedia.
So yeah, I feel like in this case, what I've learned, it actually goes the other direction. Umineko feels like a very direct response to the narrative style of Higurashi. And like, how can we do something like that feels similar, but is very drastically different in how it works and what it's trying to say? Now that we've set up this kind of system of telling the same series of events over and over with slightly differing details between them, how can we use that same format and subvert it even further? Which is, the mystery Sayo wrote and then the forgeries. Thank God Sayo never wrote a mystery with Angie in it. Would have ruined the whole game right there. Sorry. I know I'm being mean about I love that game so much that I can pick on it, okay? But yeah. And also in that sense, I kind of wasn't thrown for a loop when chapter 2 was the same series of events but different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like that might have been very strange for someone like coming into it for the first time. And it's also less strange knowing a bit about the games that have been inspired by Higurashi that come after it. Games and stories with serial repetitive narratives are much more common now than they were in 02. Stuff like serial repetitive narratives, so stuff like Steins Gate, ReZero are the ones I always harp back to. But even before that, they weren't as common. I think like right? As a
Even that doesn't feel like as loopy, right?
Right, because also had a whole second half that was just completely out the window. But like that same sense of like telling a same narrative but with different events and slightly changed events and what that can tell us about deeper underlying truths of the scenario, right?
Although I have a counterexample for you.
Sure.
The movie Groundhog Day.
Yeah, perfect. Like Groundhog Day. Exactly. Like there weren't as many things I think Groundhog Day is fairly brought up, but is also kind of exception that proves the rule in that it's definitely not as common then as it was, nowadays.
Hinamizawa Groundhog Day.
Hinamizawa Groundhog Day.
That's what the game is.
That's what the game is. Again, without trying to commit to what this serial repetitive narratives actually says about the metaphysics of the situation, right? Whether it's time loops or whether it's or variations or forgeries, variations on a written theme.
Have you read The Girl Who Leapt Through Time?
I watched the film.
Okay.
And I did read the book, actually.
Okay.
It's a junior novel. Did you know that? It's a kid's novel.
Yeah.
I have it on my bookshelf. So yeah, there's another famous instance of that kind of thing. Highly recommend Girl Who Leapt Through Time, by the way. Do get that. So again, not to say it didn't exist, but I'm definitely saying that Steins Gate is a watershed. I don't expect a whole lot of pushback on that. But as we're seeing now, Steins Gate probably does owe some of that to Higurashi. And Umineko also started serializing before that, right? Steins Gate was in late aughts, and Umineko was 07?
02? Oh, Umineko. When was Umineko?
Yeah.
I forget.
But either way, like Steins Gate clearly owes some debt to that.
Umineko was 07, you were correct.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah.
And Steins Gate was 09.
I guess in some ways, like playing Umineko first kind of prepared me for this, and like to kind of accept it at face value and immediately start looking for more universal truths rather than trying to interrogate why we're looping at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like why we're seeing the same narrative but with different events. It's more like I figure we'll get an explanation for it, but I also figure that's not really the point. I guess playing Umineko first has made me realize like it doesn't super matter why it's happening. It doesn't matter if there is some god controlling it behind the scenes, controlling events, turning back time, and playing with pieces to make them happen differently. What matters is what these different events reveal to us about the core truths of the era, right, and of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the game will eventually tell us what was the actual canonical series of events, or at least allude to it, or give us enough to figure it out. Kind of like Umineko eventually does tell you that, or give you enough to figure it out. But also like Umineko, the actual series of events isn't super important. It's the stuff that it reveals about the characters and their lives that's important. Like, it's not super important that Angie finally gets to realize that, oh yeah, her parents were the ones that instigated all the murders and freely killed everyone and stuff. It's more important that what does this reveal about Sayo and Battler's relationship with one another? It's more important about, like, what does this reveal about Ava's state of mind? What does this reveal about the Ushiromias as a family? All of that stuff. So yeah, Umineko prepared me for a serial narrative in the sense that I don't particularly feel the need to interrogate it right now. The game will tell us, or maybe it won't. But I'm more interested in what what we can deduce about the core truths of the people in Hinamizawa from this, less than I am interested in finding a factual canonical series of events. That sort of makes sense?
It does.
Yeah. Hey, Eskay and editing here for a second time. Just letting you know that you're about to enter the section that is spoiling one particular detail of this game that I happened to know going into it. If you want to follow along with the series and not kind of have stuff given to you just by fiat and follow along with my own reasoning and logic, this would be a good time to click away. Hi, welcome to the super special spoilery thing section where I talk about the one thing that I know about this game that was spoiled for me.
Yeah?
So the one thing that was spoiled for me in this game, I alluded to it earlier on. The one thing that was spoiled for me is that Rika done be time looping. Someone posted a meme at one point that showed a bunch of different characters from time loop anime and VN properties, and among them was Rika Furude, alongside like your Okabe Rintaros, your Natsuki
Spoilers.
Subarus. That's not a spoiler. That's what everyone knows about Steins Gate and ReZero. I'm not saying the other ones on it because those are spoilers.
I just think it's very funny if someone was really excited about Steins Gate, the time travel game, but didn't know there was time looping in it. That would be really funny to me.
For example, I didn't say the name of that would be a spoiler.
Well, now you
wouldn't
did.
It? Or what about
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that would be spoilers, but I bleep them out, so they're not. Anyway, so I do know that Rika is time looping.
Okay.
Which I'm assuming is what the framing device is. I'm also assuming that's the explanation for why she seems so mature and, very well put together and capable for someone her age, and why she's taking care of Satoko, and why that hasn't immediately fallen apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because she is, I don't know, like 30. However old she is. I don't know how long it's been going on for or what the circumstances of it are, if it just started now or whatnot. I have reason to believe it might have started earlier than that, just because she already seems to have that level of maturity going into the first chapter. Maybe we're showing the chapters out of order, but it already seems like she's been, I think it's easy to put it on her being like, she's the head of the family, it's expected of her. But I think it's also clear that, like, even the narration mentioned that she acts like an old lady at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's clearly what's going on there. So, yeah.
So, third part.
Yep.
What's up with Rika? The one thing you were spoiled on before this game version.
So, Rika done time traveling.
Yeah?
She's time looping, which means that she's probably the only one who has a greater idea of what's staying the same between loops, which probably means that she is the only one that has the capacity to do anything to change it.
Mm.
It's up in the air how much of things are changed, are just natural variants, I guess. I don't know how much water that holds in a time loop story, but if she's the only one that remembers things happening, or if she's the one that the time loop is surrounding about, it's clear that she's the one with agency. When Keiichi talks to her behind the school thing, after she's already been beat up by Mion, or, Shion at that point, for talking to her, it's clear Rika knows more about what's going on than she's telling Keiichi. And this be like, don't worry, I got this. Makes it seem like she's seen this before and she has a plan for how she wants to tackle it. Maybe this is only her second time around or something like that. If something changes, if there is a way out of all of this, it's going to be because Rika solves it. Maybe Keiichi has enough bystander energy to be there to be the linchpin, but it's going to be Rika's story.
Mm.
And here's the other thing that ties into that one thing being a know about Rika. I'm pretty sure Rika being stuck in time loops is the curse of Oyoshiro-sama. The curse of Oyoshiro-sama is real, and the curse of Oyoshiro-sama is that she be time looping. So, that's my hot take
Okay.
And again, I want to point out that knowing this fact has not gotten me nearly as far as I worried it would.
Yeah, you'd think that knowing a twist like this would kind of crack things wide open,
But
and
no,
it kind of doesn't at all.
It kind of doesn't, which speaks to how much there is going on in this game. But that said, I do feel like I wanted to segregate it in its own section at the end here, so that way it's, because I do kind of know that by fiat and not guessing or surmising it, it feels wrong to include in with the rest of the speculation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if someone is watching this series for the first time on their own. Like, I don't want them to have that spoiled for them as well by necessity.